OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
The comfort for him in this second half. Forward it goes again by Kinsella. Quinn heads on. Oh, surely this time for Keane. And Ireland do it. Robbie Keane, in the second minute of stoppage time, has scored the equaliser. Look at these scenes. Just look at these scenes.
Iconic commentary from an iconic commentator, John Motson, from the World Cup 2002. A big moment for Irish fans, many of whom would have been consuming it on different channels. Really nice to hear that. Colm Boohig, good morning to you.
Just look at those scenes. Just look at those scenes. That's just look at its face. Just look at its face. That's the answer to it.
Repeating the line makes it iconic almost in itself. I felt as if in the couple of seconds between saying it the first time and pausing, he was aware that for dramatic effect, another delivery would really hammer it home.
Yeah, I think it's the rise in tone is required too to make it an iconic moment. But you and I were discussing pre-show there the meaning of commentary, and maybe we'll get to that later in the Firepit when Kathleen joins us. But I suppose commentators are defined by their moments, or i.e. the moments of the matches themselves. So if you're a commentator associated with an iconic moment in a great match, does that make you a great commentator? It really depends how you react to that moment. And Matty was kind of I suppose an ever-present in our lives growing up. Like, he started the very early 1970s as 71, and then Ronnie Radford was 1972, the famous FA Cup goal, and he wasn't even meant to do that game. And so fate occurred. He was a last-minute fill-in. He wasn't supposed to do that. I'm not sure of the details, but I do know that happened.
Give me a response when I actually answer. Yeah, he was a little bit.
Well, I suppose like that commentary is iconic, as is the goal.
Yeah.
And he wasn't meant to be working that day, basically. So it was a sliding doors moment, and from there he got more and more games. And then the rivalry with Barry Davis over the years is fascinating. They've each written about this in their respective autobiographies, about that rivalry and how one got a bigger game over the other and how it really hurt the alternative commentator. And they were kind of friends as well at the same time. But I just grew up with Mats, and I suppose you did too.
I used to go. We never had the channels when I was younger, so I used to go across to the neighbour's house for Apple Tart and Match of the Day every weekend, and it was such a highlight. I mean, at that age, I don't know, was the Apple Tart more the highlight than the football? Probably a little bit of both, but the people across the road, he would have been my godfather. He was a school principal, very sort of, traditional Irish people, but the football, for a traditional Irish household, the football was king. And Match of the Day was king, and it was John Motson and it was Barry Davis. I have to say, I would have always had a leaning more for Davis. That would have been my thing at that time.
Davis had more dulcet tones, I think.
There's an instinct in you when you rehear an old commentary that brings you back, or that captures you, or stops you in your stride. Well, that's always Barry Davis for me. It'd be a lot of commentators that would, look, Motson was obviously there. He was like, as you said, there was a huge rivalry. He'd have been on every Match of the Day that was going. But it was Davis for me, yeah.
Well, I think the BBC leaned towards Davis in the mid-1990s. So Davis got the 1994 World Cup final between Brazil and Italy, and Motson was devastated over that. And I think Davis got, consecutive FA Cup finals around that time too. So when United beat Chelsea, and then the following year when Everton beat United, I think Davis was getting those games, and it just inspired Motson to return to bigger and better things.
Well, it's rarefied air. Like, there's only one person's getting the gig. And
that's it. It's the goalkeeper of journalism, isn't it? There's only one gig going. But as I was saying to you yesterday, it was like, football commentator is such a specific job, and as you said in response, a rare one at that. But I think, look, it's like he didn't stay for decades just because he was in the building and he was handy to have around. I think he really did add something, and I was listening to the lads on the newsround last night, and unsurprisingly, I think Richie was brilliant on it, because that's really his wheelhouse, is commentary and nostalgia, I suppose, in football. And Richie, I think, summed up brilliantly by saying Motson was just so passionate about every single game he commentated on, to the point where he had no discrimination about the quality of the game. It was just, I'm so happy to be doing this job for a living. And I hope I'm going to share that joy with you, and I could bring you along for the journey. And that's, I think, why he lasted so long.
50 years at the BBC is just an incredible career and an incredible legacy. And like, certainly, they talk about, I was listening to Mark Lawrenson earlier this morning, he was talking about Motty's ability to capture the moment. And like, that in itself creates iconic moments. And I do feel there are times where an iconic moment in a sporting event can be commentated on, and regardless of how good or bad the commentary is, it can become iconic because of the moment it's being commentated upon, if you get me. As in, the commentary could be grand, but it's accompanied like Messi scoring the goal in a World Cup final, and it doesn't really matter as long as you say something, it's grand. It's going to be. But Madi had an ability to sort of rise slightly above that.
I think so. I think you're right. That's what we were touching on at the start. There is that if it is an incredible moment, that's 90% of the work done for the commentator. The really only thing you can do is mess it up, and obviously he never did. But I think that extra 10% is what separates the great commentators from the good. And they understand that moment is coming, and they react.
Anybody can do commentary.
Well, you said that to me pre-show, and I don't know about that now.
Yeah,
I mean, I like anyone who's able to speak, yes. But I think there's very few people that can actually commentate.
Anybody can do commentary, but doing it well, doing it well is a different. Well, you asked me the question, I answered it, and then you re-asked me, and I had to answer it again.
No, but I didn't think you heard me.
Yeah, no, I heard you.
Have you commentated?
Yeah. I'm wandering into Cork now.
The Cork is coming out at you, which is great to see.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking which games?
What were you doing? I did some.
We might get it up there.
I did some Heineken. No, you won't find them. I did some Heineken Cup commentaries.
Okay.
Years ago, and it's very enjoyable. Anybody can do genuinely anybody can do commentary. It's whether it can be done well or not, of course, is a whole other thing, and it's a very subjective field, of course, as well. Like it's you start to throw out names about I like this guy or this girl.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of subject. People feel so passionately about their commentators. Yeah. We were discussing it yesterday on WhatsApp. I've discussed it a million times with mates, colleagues. This person's a commentary. A bad commentator or a perceived bad commentator has the ability to ruin a match for me. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, my enthusiasm for this is like come down 5 decibels. Because of who's on commentary.
I never thought look, we're probably eating into our Firepit time because I know we're going to discuss this.
Back to it later is what you're saying.
I think just to leave it at this is like I thought that I kind of took commentators for granted, and then I'd watch games in silence. You need the commentary. You need the commentary. Well, it brings you along with it.
Let's come back to it later.
Also, finally on John Matson, I associate him personally with Football Focus.
Right.
Saturday mornings on BBC, Saturday midday. And they'd bring him on about halfway through the programme, and he'd be live at a stadium, and it brings so much joy to me remembering that.
3 hours before.
Yeah, exactly, 3 hours, and it was like, it's the Goodison Park. It just always rings a bell with the blue seats in the background and the famous fur coat, or an iteration of it. And as you say, he would set the scene, and he just brought so much like youthful enthusiasm despite getting on in life to the fact that he's a football commentator at the top level of the game, and this is what he wanted to do, and there's so few people in the world who actually end up getting to do what they want to do.
Would you like to do commentary?
I don't know. I talked to Nathan about this recently as well. I was thinking I'd watch games at home sometimes and I'd commentate along just to see, I wonder what I'll do this. It's like, Jesus, tiring. 5 minutes into it,
your style of a commentary would be, I would say, an acquired taste. Is that an unfair thing to say?
Yeah, I think it's desperately unfair.
But I could see you like,
especially live, because like when he reacted a certain way.
Goal. There's a goal. Rashford's he scored a goal. It'd be all very matter of fact. There's a goal.
No. I would. I could go to different levels.
Maybe not for United. You might be a little bit more. There'd be no debate about.
No, I wouldn't. Honest to God, I could watch a game at home and I wouldn't react at all if there was a camera just on me watching a United game. You wouldn't know the difference if there was a goal.
That's what I mean. You'd be deadpan like.
All right.
There's a goal from the halfway line.
I wouldn't be. No.
That could be the greatest goal I've ever seen.
I have several levels I can get to. I've never needed to.
He's getting very defensive about something.
I'm not. No, I'd invite you along to see these different levels.
I think we should. This needs to be tried out.
I'll send you some voice notes.
No, don't do that.
I will. Yeah. I will. I'll send you some voice notes and I'll just give you different examples. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that later. You're not busy, are you? This afternoon?
No,
probably not.
I've been trying to organise paddle tennis.
Oh yeah,
you sort of reach that age where you're like, what are the sort of sports that I could actually play here? And I foresee a long paddle tennis career in my future. But I've been trying to get you to buy into it, but you're not having it. Like
your man says to me here recently, do you want to take up paddle? Do you want to play a game of paddle?
I literally said you want to go for a game.
Do you want to give paddle? I was like, yeah, no bother. Yeah, I was like, it's just €70 for the bats there. I send it over whenever you have it. It's like, is this some sort of extortion? Like, is this paddle actually exist?
That's all I could find on one what I would have considered to be a fairly accessible sports equipment provider.
Yeah, well, luckily we have an associate mutual who's done some research for us and has found a much more competitive price that we could actually take
€15 for a paddle.
€15 for a paddle.
So anyway, but basically what we're saying is, does anybody out there, because we really don't know what we're doing, we're like looking up the rules. It seems like you have to play doubles, which complicates things straight away. But if anybody out there has an experience of playing paddle tennis or knows what the hell they're talking about, or can give us any guidance, we're here for it.
Absolutely. No, we are. Genuinely. Please,
Chris was in
send
contact
in your information. Go ahead.
On YouTube saying Apple Tart and Match of the Day should be on a t-shirt.
Oh, that should, yeah. I mean, maybe it will now. Maybe there's a market opening for that.
There was also the thing of, you know, the way they talk about like Irish voices in the UK, whether it's like a Terry Wogan or a Des Lynam, or the various Irish voices. For a second, I was like, various Irish voices that would have featured on the UK channels over the years, and because they never you could have been from Dublin or Cork or Galway or wherever, people never really over there knew the difference between an Irish accent anyway. It was like, wow, they're all the one. Yes. Although, to be fair now, the lads that I've mentioned there, their voices, their accents did very much sort of shift across the Irish channel at some point or another. But equally, I would say, like, you know, we never distinguished between, like, I couldn't tell you where John Motson actually came from. Yeah. Like, there was no, certainly growing up, there was no, like, oh, he might be from London or Birmingham, or, like, there was never, whereas I'm sure actually as an English person growing up watching that commentary, you probably always have an inkling of, that informs your opinion, I suppose, on you know, how good a commentator is or otherwise. Whereas for us, it was just like there was a homogeny about it.
Yeah, totally. But I think it was, just a general English accent, but it wasn't so much the localization of any form of where the guy was from. It was more that I associate John Matson as the default commentator on football, and he happened to be from England, and there was definitely nothing specific about him, but he brought razzmatazz to the occasion, and I think he was very aware that he was doing that. I think he went out of his way to carve that niche. Another thing about him is that, by all accounts, his preparation was second to none, like unparalleled in that industry.
People used to use that to beat him with, almost, to a degree.
Well, I suppose for the people who were more natural, they were like, you know, you don't need to do that much prep. But Clive Tilsley posted a video not long ago, and it went viral on Twitter, of his preparation for a match, and there's pages and pages of handwritten notes. We never saw Matson's, but by all accounts, from what you've heard from his peers, from anyone who worked with him, was that his research was very intense and long, and he would be prepared for every sequence in a game, and also have stuff pre-prepared, but also have the ability to react. And like that Robbie Keane 2002 Germany moment, like, I think we were all watching on RT. I don't think I watched it on the BBC, but that goal for me is it's so etched in my memory, because I always thought it went over. I always thought Oliver Kahn saved it, and it went over the bar and over the other side of the net and fell down.
How long did it take you to realise that?
Like I'd say 3/4 of a second.
Okay, yeah.
Which is a long time at that time, and it was only because of the reaction of everyone around. But I was convinced the ball went over. Yeah. So anyone,
because you just think like good things can't happen. You know, good things don't happen.
Well, I just thought we had lost our chance. Yeah. Big time.
The little pause to let the ball come past him a little bit before he pulls the trigger.
It's such an odd goal. Beautiful. How Oliver Kahn just stays in his line, and Keane's about 4 yards away from him. But luckily we had another game last night to talk about as well.
Fergus Keogh wonders, thanks producer, did Des Lynam have an Irish accent? I mean, I take the point. Yeah, I do take the point. Yeah. It was definitely, there was a point where it was like somebody pointed out that he was from Clare, and I was like, all right, wow.
I absolutely love Des.
Yeah, he was smooth.
What were you like in commentary? Were you able to go up levels?
Oh yeah, I had loads of levels, yeah.
Would you know you're listening to Adrian Barry?
Oh yeah.
Would you?
Yeah.
You want to move on from this, do you?
Yeah, but I don't know where we're going. But we're going to talk about United Barcelona last night, because you're excited about this one. And what's not to be excited about watching? If you sort of closed your eyes and ears to everything that was going on around United for the last 10 years, you would have been like, oh wow, geez, United are still at this. Look at this Champions League semi-final.
Yeah. It
was hard to believe it was like a Europa League last 32. I mean, both teams, up to a point, were going for it. I felt that, like, obviously after half time, Eric Ten Hag, who's becoming more of a genius by every game that goes past, and not a man afraid to make a decision at half time.
No,
that pays off in spades.
Thankfully, yeah. No, there was a sense of increased jeopardy, because the Europa League have changed the rules this season, so that was a playoff rather than last 32 to join the rest who were already in the last 16. I think that actually helped the tie. It was brilliant tie over the two games. The one at the Nou Camp as well was extraordinary, but this game is there was kind of an ominous air to it at the start, because United did start well. Bruno Fernandes had a great chance, which he probably took an extra touch from, and Ter Stegen saved it, but Barca were coming into it. And I mean, the penalty was, I don't think there was any debate at all about that penalty. Like, it was stonewall for me. I think it was a ridiculous challenge by Fernandes. I saw a lot of debate online. I thought it was absolute. I was actually impressed that the ref gave that, because it's such a foul that would have been given any other area of the pitch. And a referee would be very tempted not to give that as a penalty, but it was stonewall penalty for me. And then so close to saving that. And of course, he's tied with Peter Schmeichel with the all-time clean sheet record for Manchester United. So what a way that would have been to get it. He got it at the League Cup final this Sunday.
Saves last
brilliant!
night.
Yeah, the header from Koundé as well in the second half.
Class.
But as you say, Ten Hag's ability to react to something that's not working is definitely the best that the club has seen since Alex Ferguson. So in the first half, there were two players in that United team who stood out for all the wrong reasons, and that was Wout Weghorst and Jadon Sancho, who were both liabilities, to put it lightly. United overall weren't playing that great. Fernandes, as Kathleen was mentioning pre-show, had a game of two halves and was his kind of typical very frustrating self when he himself is very frustrated and takes it out for all the wrong reasons. But he came out in the second half and was much better. But the first half, I thought Weghorst looked like he belonged in a different level, like a couple of levels down, just could not keep hold of the ball.
No great surprise to anybody. I don't think was he ever brought in with the intention of being
I mentioned it to Clive Allen in the football kickoff, and I was like, was this the right signing? And Clive was fairly adamant that it was, because it gave them another dimension and an option, and that does, because he doesn't fit the realm of the other players.
Bench option when things have gone to crap.
Yeah, you can say that with Haaland, the Man City doesn't also fit the rest of the team, but it works. But with Weghorst, I just don't think it does work. And with Sancho, it's strange, because there's been so much love and support for him since he made a comeback from his hiatus from the squad, and when he went over to the Netherlands on that fitness camp. And for the first 2 weeks of his return, it's gone quite well, and he scored against Leicester City last weekend, a lovely finish. But last night, he just looked like he didn't want to be there. At the end of the first half, he didn't want the ball. And Dave McIntyre and Jerry Armstrong were saying on commentary, and it was actually Dave who alerted me to it, that
very good commentator.
Every time Sancho's getting the ball, he's giving it away. And I'm not talking like because he's trying ambitious passes or true balls or anything like that. I'm talking passes from me to you, and it would be the wrong way to pass, so a Barcelona player would intercept it. And he looked like he wanted to get off the pitch, but he lasted an hour. So there is something in Ten Hag, that he has this ability to never mind any personal connection with any players or perceived bias, or maybe a player would take it the wrong way. You are out if you're not performing. And Rio Ferdinand actually met Bruno Fernandes this week and interviewed him and talked about just that. And Fernandes was calling out the players that Ten Hag was ruthless with. The big one being Cristiano Ronaldo. He was like, Ten Hag, when he came in, this is Fernandes' words, was saying, if people don't adhere to what I want them to do, they're out of the team. And Fernandes was saying he and his teammates were like, yeah, we'll see, basically.
Exactly. Well, everybody was saying we'll see.
Yeah, it was like, we'll see.
Well, all that played out right up until the end. People were like, well, we'll see.
And then Ronaldo started the season, I think he started against Brentford in that now infamous 4-0 defeat, and played a few more games and was dropped unceremoniously. And then that's when they knew, okay, this guy's not joking. And they did the same with Marcus Rashford not too long ago, away to Wolves at Molineux, when Rashford was late for a team meeting, dropped unceremoniously,
comes off the bench,
scores the winner. So he has this ability to just to get the most out of his players. But it's so funny, because at the very start of the season, if you take back to Ten Hag, a lot of people were complaining at the fact that he didn't have much charisma and he didn't give an awful lot away in press conferences. And when Ronaldo gave that interview to Piers Morgan, he says he doesn't respect Ten Hag. And at the time, the results were so-so. So you could be on the fence. You could go with Ronaldo. You might.
I think anybody who's siding with Ronaldo after that,
But perception is everything, because now we're 3 months on and the results have been phenomenal. And all of a sudden, Ten Hag is the epitome of calm and composure.
Winning is everything.
So they're using his perceived lack of charisma from 6 months ago to say that this guy does not get affected by anything and plays at his own level, and didn't go crazy with celebrations when the final whistle went last night. Kind of expected that should be the result.
Come on.
By his standards, he was like happy out.
No.
He
was up to the bench. Everybody that was coming off, he was like,
I'm saying he was.
I did note that they all came down. Having Steve McLaren is hugely warm.
No, he was delighted.
I did note that Harry Maguire came down just after Steve McLaren and had a head in him like a smacked arse. He was like,
yeah. Well.
I mean, I would have thought for still club captain.
Yes.
Come on.
To go back to that, I'm not saying he wasn't happy. Of course, he was delirious, I'm sure, internally, because everything's working out so well. Everything's coming up Millhouse for Ten Hag. But he didn't display any massive amount of euphoria or affection. I don't think, anyway, by the general standards of a manager that might react to a result like that. On the Maguire point, that's another good example of the clarity in the situation and the decisiveness that Ten Hag has. It's like, no, this guy's out. Where in previous regimes he was mostly in and the odd time out. Now it's noteworthy if Maguire plays. He played against Leeds recently, and I raised my eyebrows at that. So he doesn't play him too often. But look, it's going really well. And I remember thinking, I think Pochettino would be the right man for United. Not too sure about Ten Hag because he's done it in the Eredivisie with Ajax. But does that mean he can transition it to the Premier League? It's going well.
Please. You know, he ends his interviews with please.
Does he?
Yeah, have you noticed this? I did text this to you about a couple of months ago. You were like, what's that all about?
You texted me yesterday, please.
No, yeah. I think he stopped doing it, which is really disappointing. Like, keep doing it. It's like, but winning papers over everything. The charisma point, as soon as you're winning everything, it's like everything you do now needs to be copied, and this is genius. And
totally.
You don't want to read, like, you don't want to make too many harsh decisions after one game, but it's probably not based off one game. And look, at Weghorst is only in as a temporary measure anyway. Let's face it, he was brought in as like
absolutely.
So he'd be. There's no big deal about him going anyway. But Sancho, like, increasingly looks like there's not going to be any room for him at United. And Maguire is surely another one to follow. Lingard, and Ronaldo out the gap.
Lingard for sure. Ronaldo gone. Maguire gone. If he stays, I'd be shocked. Sancho, there's probably just a little bit left. He has the talent, but the problem with Sancho was his head. He just doesn't seem to have any self-belief, which is surprising considering what he achieved at Borussia Dortmund. Like, his stats at Dortmund are incredible, and that's not exactly a low standard of league. So he was able to do it at a high level, but it's just not worked for him at United so far. And I suppose if it doesn't work under a manager as hot right now as Ten Hag, then Sancho could be in trouble with his future at the club. But he really stood out for me last night, and he looked out of his depth, like, which is something I never thought I'd say about Sancho in terms of his technical ability. But technically, he was all over the shop last night. And
because the way that Ten Hag has brought on, like, you look at the players last night, there was a touch that Rashford had at one point in the second half. I don't remember the crossfield ball coming from a height, sort of half
I
over his shoulder.
Yeah.
And he takes a touch. He's so nonchalant about the whole thing, but just a player oozing with confidence. So obviously Ten Hag is getting that out of his players to infuse them with this belief and confidence and support, which, if in that environment Sancho hasn't flourished in previous environments, can flourish in that environment.
Well, can you imagine how bad he feels about himself if everybody else is flourishing around him but he's not? So that will actually make him worse again. Because you look at, say, someone like Aaron Wan-Bissaka, lost cause last season. He's come on leaps and bounds this year, and what he's done is he's just simplified his game. Very crisp, one touch passing, two touch at the most. Ten Hag's getting the most out of him. Shout out too for Fred. What form he's under. Fredge, as Richie pronounced it. Touched with his bad foot, finished with his bad foot. 2 minutes into the second half.
In Brazil.
With Richie over on this side of the world, because I'd say Fred.
7:53, it's OTB AM, and we're delighted to have you along with us this morning. Here's what's going on over the show for this morning. We've Ronan O'Gara standing by. He's going to join us very shortly to look ahead to round 3 of the Six Nations. We're going to be joined by Daniel Harris. We'll have a bit more reflections on the action and the Europa League last night, looking ahead as well to the league final on Sunday. Alan Quinlan has been floating around outside the door in the last couple of moments, so I presume is itching to get in and talk some rugby for you a little bit later on. We'll have a Friday Firepit as usual at 9:10 this morning. And then Brian McDermott, the former Reading manager, was in conversation with Nathan on the show last night. It's a brilliant watch, and that'll be coming your way at 9:30. OTBAM, of course, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. What are you pointing at?
That Brian McDermott interview is fantastic.
Very good.
We are biased, but it really is.
Ronan O'Gara, good morning to you.
Guys, good morning.
How are you keeping?
You're in form anyway.
Have we talked to you before about who you if you have a soccer team that you support?
Of course, Liverpool. I'm apologied you even asked.
You mentioned it in your Examiner column.
You're delighted at
devastated
at United's resurgence.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Obviously, because it's grown up in Cork. That was the Liverpool, Man United. You supported one of the two. Obviously, there was a few outliers that supported Everton, or as Paul O'Connell does, or someone like that. But yeah, of course, the Premiership was huge in my generation. Huge.
We talk a lot about like getting the best out of players. Are you watching what Ten Hag is doing there at the minute? Like we were just talking about like United. Colm was saying United are the best they've been since Fergie was there, and he seems to be getting much better out of players who were looking a little bit average before he arrived. Do you watch stuff like that and pay attention to it?
Yeah, I was watching it too. I think also it was quite evident, even though it felt like the old Trafford last night, even before a ball was kicked. There was a kind of an eerie anticipation, silence, let's get into these guys. Watching Man United probably up to last night, you felt that it was a little bit off. I was probably more taken by your confidence conversation, because that for me is the key to everything in sport, and the fact that when it rolls and when it's easy, and then you feel like you're doing exactly the same thing in a game, it can be narrowed even down to the technical side of goal kicking, but even in a player's flow of a game without any of those, I suppose, set piece skills. When you have confidence how easy the game is, you're just kind of going autopilot and you play. But if you have that in soccer's term for 11, or in football for 15, or in rugby for 15, it becomes so interesting, because you're not in confidence all your career. That is, I suppose, the big difference for how the public perceive the robotic performances as opposed to the emotions and carrying a niggle or out of form of a sportsman.
Have you seen an example like Jadon Sancho yourself, where teammates around him are flourishing but he's not, even though he has technical ability? Have you seen like a former teammate or even one of your own players now go through something like that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and because he's a big player for me, and because he's a good guy and I like him a lot. Greg Aldred is probably in that situation at the minute, in the fact that he didn't rip it up because of the standard he's created against Italy. He gets taken off after 50 minutes in Ireland. Caelan Doris was the guy who stole the show. The opposite number of Caelan Doris is Greg Aldred. Greg Aldred is a fantastic rugby player, but at the minute he's doing it tough. But I know it'll come good if he kind of stays true to what he believes in, if he keeps up his work rate on the ball, off the ball, but also has a good kind of lifestyle off the pitch. You can never be 9 out of 10 every game. I think what the great players do is that when on bad days they have, they hit a 5 or a 6, while early on it was evident when I was trying to, I suppose, understand the mental side of the game. I could have a 9, but then the next week you can have a 2. But not alone does it break you, but it also breaks your forwards, because if they have a kicker, we'll say in rugby's term, on the pitch, where they've given everything to win a scrum penalty, they're shattered, then okay, the captain points at the posts, upsets Raj, and you miss it. It not alone does it eat away at you, but it also eats at them subconsciously. When that call comes for, we need a scrum penalty, are they really at 100%? Because do they fully believe that you're going to kick it over the bar? So I think that's, if you can get a handle on that, you'd be the next genius coach. Yeah.
Have you been in a situation where you're standing over the ball, it's a penalty, 75th minute, and all you're thinking is about, I don't want to leave my teammates down, rather than the technique of the kick itself?
Yeah, of course, but that's stage one of development of I suppose, getting on the kicking ladder, in the fact that, as you know from previous conversations, probably in the 78th minute, I was hoping that this decisive penalty wouldn't be ordered to you, because you're trying to escape and not putting that. But then it's a learning process. Then at the end of your career, or when you're feeling good, you crave that moment, and you crave close games, and you're kind of pissed off if you're in a runaway lead, because I'm not going to be really put in a clutch position here. And that's, I suppose, the sickness of the beauty of the mind, depending how you look upon it.
There's an obvious segue here, so I'm going to take it into Ross Byrne this weekend, and the journey that he's been on, running over the last couple of years. Some interesting stuff from the media bits during the week, where he was asked about the improvements in his game, and he was kind of my game hasn't actually improved that much. It's more like what you've been saying about me has not been that accurate, and now that's all coming to bear. But equally, the confidence that he must be getting, that must be flowing through him at the minute, from seemingly been the number 2 and the man to take over after Sexton, and hitting his timing right. That must be the confidence surging through him at the minute must be massive.
It is, exactly, but I think there's probably another chapter. I don't think he's anywhere near his optimum level, in the fact that I think I'd love to actually hear what he really has to say, because I'd say he's hurting a lot. He's been pillified in Irish sport, never mind Irish rugby, and the fact that how is this guy kind of even number 2 in Leinster, was some of the chat, if I was to recall it accurately, and he was bashed, but he is that's why, people always in the environment are the best people to judge, because you see whatever minimum 100 minutes of them every day, be it in a kind of a technical session or in an actual rugby session, so you have a fair idea. So, but I don't have the data to hand, but his contribution to Leinster has been quite staggering in the fact, I suppose, how many big games he's played and how many big moments he's had. And then there was probably only in the last 10 Irish games, like, people are very quick to forget that the start of the Andy Farrelly era, there was people kind of going, oh, this isn't working.
Yeah.
We'll take a pause, and I'll repeat that. There was people, plenty of them, going, no, there could be a call for change here, So now all of a sudden it's gone completely the opposite of that, and the perception is probably over-positised, if that even is a word. I don't think so. Over-exaggerated, potentially, is that what I'm looking for? And in the middle of all that has been the role of Ross Byrne. Anyone knows that you playing number 10, you need huge amounts of resilience, and thankfully he has that, because I would say there was many moments where he was nearly broken. But what I hope he will show on Saturday will be the fact that that there's life after Johnny, and I can take this team and we can get to where we want to with this team. And I think he's earned that at club level with Leinster, but because of it's his first start in the Six Nations, I think, after breaking on 6 years ago. So he needs that opportunity, and Saturday will be an opportunity, because it'll be a tougher game than people think. I feel anyway. Is
it a positive or a negative that he's playing alongside in the halfback partnership someone as equally inexperienced at Six Nations level as Craig Casey?
I think too much is at times, Colm, too much is emphasised or stressed on partnerships. It's about getting your role right. Yeah, you need your 9 and you need to be humming with him, but what we will be established in the relationship already during the week will be, you have a fair idea of what his strong points are, how he likes to play the game, and then you probably, from a 10's point of view, is that, well, similar enough to play me with Peter Stringer, you knew you'd have the ball a lot. You're going to get the ball a lot, okay? But then someone like maybe Tomas, he'd be a bit of a hog ball at times, because he'd if it was nice, he'd take it on, have a cut himself, and then if he didn't like it, he'd lash it out to you. Here, do something with that, Raj.
A hog ball is a new one on me.
It's a Cork term.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. He's hogging the ball, that fella. Get it away from him. Sorry, we're on national radio. My apologies.
You have somewhat unique experience in that, obviously you got to see Ross Byrne up close for whatever it was, 20 minutes or so in Marseille last year. Now, maybe an unusual experience in that, Leinster were backtracking due to your own strangling of the game for maybe much of that, and you don't get the proper view that you might like. But I was interested, Andy Farrell talking during the week, he was talking about he's earned the right to start, earned the right to run the team. That's the nub of it, isn't it? Because we're not looking anymore for somebody to just come in and be like a half Johnny Sexton. We're looking for somebody to come in and stamp their personality on proceedings. Yeah,
and you need that too, because the reality is, going into knockout rugby, when you're playing brutal games, if you want to win a World Cup, you need to be 3 deep. That is exactly it. So Johnny is obviously the key man, but then I think it's most definitely Ross Byrne, who has probably created a unique role for himself in the fact, in Test rugby, I think his game management, his line kicking and his goal kicking are world class. So that's very, very important when you come to Cup Rugby. I think people misunderestimate autumn internationals for Cup Rugby. So when you get to a World Cup, it's Cup Rugby at a certain stage, because it's obviously knockout. So the mentality becomes different. So how you, I suppose, create or select your best 10 backs, or is it 9 backs sometimes, potentially, and if you go 6-2 in your best 23, Ross Byrne is an invaluable asset, but also the fact, I think we also have to recognise he has made one key improvement in his game, and that he's got much better at picking the right pass, but also playing flash. I think as a 10, you need to be able to take on the line. If you're just distributor, it's easier to push off him. But he has changed that with his alignment, with obviously him probably having a look at his video analysis, but also with a good bit of good coaching. And I think it's probably underappreciated his 30 minutes against France. That game was still in the balance. You have to remember that at 26-19, wasn't it? It's still a one-score game.
Yeah,
you have obviously from playing, I know well that if France, the away team, scored at 26, mentally it feels like if you're in green, you're behind, because the momentum shift to the away team. And I suppose with the amount of French people that were in the ground that day, that's an equation that he has to play out in his head to make sure he keeps the scoreboard ticking.
Is Byrne in a difficult position here, Ronan, ahead of tomorrow? Because all expectations is a fairly comprehensive victory over Italy. So what can he do to stand out as this is genuinely impressive? Because maybe, is it something to do with the control of the game rather than his kicking?
I would think the biggest error he would make would be looking to stand out. I think why he's appreciated and why he's trusted is he gets his job done. What does getting his job done, like managing his team around the pitch? I mean, if he tries to play, for example, a game where, and I was in that category as well, where you may look to play, for example, like Felipe Contepomi could play, maybe he's not the best example, but Felipe Contepomi was a top-class 10 that could play brilliant, I suppose, cup rugby, but he was maybe suited fantastically to the barbarian style of rugby. While I am not suited to the barbarian style of rugby, Ross Byrne is more a strategist as opposed to a flair player. If he tries to rip up the line 5 times, which we probably haven't seen in any game at any level, for me that would be trying to appease the perception as opposed to drilling home and nailing his strong points.
But yeah, would he be in danger of thinking, well, if I just do my job, I'm back out next time because it won't be enough? I'll really have to stand out here.
Back out in place of who?
Well, obviously Sexton, but even in the future after Sexton, if I need to stand out for the rest of my competition, who's going to be the future Ireland 10 after the World Cup, say, I need to do more than just my job.
Believe me, that won't be anywhere near his radar tomorrow.
That's the Cork arrogance coming out in Colm there, Ronan. That's
No, it's the mindset.
It's an interesting question in the fact that, sports people, they live in the short term. If you kind of remove the 5-day target from you kind of you miss the boat. That's exactly what they're excellent at, is being really selfish and looking after their individual preparation to get the best out of them Saturday. Maybe Sunday morning it's a different conversation because we have a different set of evidence to, I suppose, dissect. But for me, he needs to get flow into his team, and he needs to marshal them around the pitch and kick his goals, and then you can be sure his manager will be happy with him.
What's the general mood in France at the minute, Ronan? Obviously, the at home to Scotland on Sunday should be an absolute belter, but the stuff hasn't gone exactly maybe like they would have hoped over the last few weeks. Everybody assuming that it's just give it time, it comes good.
Yeah, it's. I suppose it's the times we live in now, and the fact that France were on a run of 14 games. They've one defeat, and there's plenty of, I suppose, deep analysis of where it all went wrong in Dublin. So from basically being world leaders and favourites for the World Cup, it's now Ireland that are the best at everything in the press over here. So maybe I think what they may underestimate is probably a confident Scottish side this weekend. Never have, I suppose, we on this programme, or I will, obviously Scotland will have it at first that they've won 2 Six Nations games in succession. So Their juices are flowing. They're going to a fantastic stadium on Sunday to play their game with Finn Russell, obviously, an inside mole on everything about French rugby. So they have a few aces up their sleeves. And France have a few injuries, a few suspensions, and a few players out of form for me, but still remain incredibly, I suppose, unpredictable in their capacity to entertain.
Your games are scheduled right in the middle of those games, which is a bit weird. You've Brive tomorrow. I know you're not going to tell me that it's Money in the Bank. Of course, they're bottom of the table, and you're back in the touchline and staying there.
I haven't blinked.
Yeah, what's the question?
The question
exactly.
That was a question mark at the end of that.
I'm staying on the touchline. I hope to. Yeah, that's the goal. You know, it's.
Things went well for you last week. They relented a little bit.
Yes, they did. Yeah. Well, sorry, I also wasted a full day, getting to Paris and going to a hearing. So that was quite painful, obviously. But the end result was good. But the deeper question is why are you subjected to this hearing? But that's for another day. So we had a good win in Cast away. And obviously for people at home who don't follow it as much as you do, but the top 14 now, I think it's ahead of the Premiership in the fact that since the start of this season in September, there's been 4 managers sacked in the middle of the season.
Ronan, do you know what turns 16 today?
Who turned 16?
Yeah, do you know what turns 16 today? It's an anniversary.
No, go on.
Ireland 43, England 13 at Croke Park, 2007, 24th of February. What are your memories of that unbelievable game?
Why do you ask me the question on the 16th birthday? That's a bit odd, isn't it?
Well, it's just the anniversary today, and sure, we have you.
Colm in one there, it's a bit odd.
Well, I was hoping it was a 15th or a 20th, but sure, we have you here. It's the date, and if I didn't ask you, I'd regret it. So.
Well, exactly, and that's the Cork queerness.
He's trying to stand out now, Ronan. That's easy.
I'm doing a Ross
He's got his shot here, and he's trying to stand out.
Shane Hannon
just do your job, Colm.
Sexton's back in next time. Yeah.
Joe was good during the week there with Liam Hayes, so now Colm is on the attack.
That's right.
I think it's a very legitimate question. Like, that was a seismic moment in sport, and you played.
It sure was, but sure, there was so many of them, but that was incredibly special. Yeah. It was the feeling, just standing there in Croke Park and the anthems, and then the English anthem, and you wouldn't hear. There was complete and utter silence. It was spectacularly good, but that's so many days, because you move on and you move away. You kind of sometimes you can't stick. I hate looking back. I absolutely hate looking back. It's my big no. But when you see all the clips of it, it's particularly special. Yeah, it's considering the history associated with that ground as well. Obviously,
I was in the crowd that day, and there was the concern during the English anthem was that some idiot or somebody somewhere was going to do something or say something, and it's such a size of a crowd. Who knows what goes on? People have a couple of pints in them, whatever. Was that concern amongst the players? Were you thinking about it or talking about it? Or
yeah, because it was discussed, I suppose, during the week, and I think we all had that apprehension and the fact that, like, if you have, however, was it 80,000 people in the grounds, or was it? I don't know, 80, but it's a lot of people packed into a very small area. So if something negative was to happen, it could be a potentially horrendous situation. So that's the very, very deep negative side of your thoughts in game day. But for the anthems, obviously that was people weren't too sure how they would kick off, but I think the respect shown and the silence shown just brought the decibel level to unheard levels in Croke Park before any sporting occasion I was involved in. Anyway, just when you're kind of the referee kind of blows his whistle, okay, we can start, and then the crowd just launch in behind you. It was great times.
Yeah, incredible. Ronan, thanks a million.
Cheers, lads. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Great to chat.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ronan there on the line there from La Rochelle. I had a pretty interesting weekend in the rugby. Colm trying to make it all about himself as usual.
No, that's a bit much. Come on now, please.
Can we ask about the under-20s, please, lads? Says Dan. We'll have Alan Quinlan on just a little bit, and we will do just that. What else have we got here? John O'D. Fatty did United a favour too by taking that one off Lewandowski's head in the last minute. I did think that, and I actually thought that Lewandowski followed through with a bit of a nudge on Fatty, as if to say,
give him a shout.
take it out.
Sunday League football.
Maybe he did.
Bob's ball. Bob.
But you think that's what he goes by?
He was, yeah, Bobby Lewandowski. Someone just suggested Sweet 16. That was the anniversary, so it was legitimate, Anyway,
that's just an added word just to legitimise it a bit more.
Anyway, you have a lovely read there.
It's 8:15. It's Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM. We're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We've loads still to come. We're going to be joined by Alan Quinlan. What are you laughing at now?
Go ahead.
We're joined by Alan Quinlan in a little bit. We're going to have Aisling O'Reilly on the line from Rome, obviously ahead of the big game this weekend. We're going to have the Friday Firepit. I'm not 100% sure what's in the mixer this week, but a couple of amazing topics, no doubt. And we'll have Daniel Harris after these.
Listen to OTB AM live every weekday morning from 7:30 on your smart speaker. Just ask Alexa to play OTB Sports Radio.
Harry Kane!
Join me, Stephen Doyle, for this Sunday's London derby clash between Tottenham and Chelsea in the Premier League.
What a blistering start!
Yeah, no, it's massive. We knew it was going to be a tough game.
We need to clear our heads and we need to start to prepare for Tottenham.
It kicks off at a slightly earlier time of 1:30.
And Reece James fires a rocket into the back of the net, and Chelsea's dominance is now demonstrated.
The build-up to our full live exclusive commentary starts from 1 o'clock on Off the Ball this Sunday.
The Heineken Champions Cup is back. Leinster take on Ulster in the round of 16, Saturday, April 1st at 5:30 in the Aviva Stadium. Join the Sea of Blue for this massive inter-provincial clash. Tickets on sale now at leinsterrugby.ie. Terms and conditions apply.
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
It's 17 minutes past 8. It's Friday morning. You're welcome along to OTB AM. We've loads still to come. Liam Griffin as well, by the way, is going to join us in a little bit to talk all things hurling. His defeated motion from GA Congress last week, and we'll get to that and plenty more as well. So it is, as I said, 17 minutes past 8, and Daniel Harris is on the line. Good morning, Daniel.
Hello.
Lots to get to from last night, needless to say. But before all of that, you've been reminiscing, as we all have here, last night and again this morning, about the late, great John Motson, who passed away yesterday.
Yeah, Motti he's, for people of my age, I'm 43, he was the voice of our childhood, where we caught the end of David Coleman, and then there was a bit of Tony Gubba, a bit of Alan Parry, and obviously Barry Davis. But John Motson was the BBC's lead commentator for so many years that he was just the voice of football. And the thing about it that was different, I guess, to now is that you didn't get much football on. But most of the football that you did get was on the BBC, so it was Motson. So him and Brian Moore were the two voices that you heard all the time. So just hearing those voices kind of introduces frisson to strides, because football was on television was a relative rarity in those days. So it was always a kind of celebration when it was on. And Motti was the voice of that and the voice of so many massive moments, whether things that I experienced at the time or things that I experienced by learning the history of football, which I was talking to a friend actually yesterday who was saying, because there's so much football on now, like he was saying his son doesn't really need to bother with watching old Match of the Day videos in the way that I did when I was growing up, because there's so much that he can consume right now. But when that wasn't the case, I was devouring. Motti did these BBC videos. They were the best of Match of the Day, the 60s, 70s and 80s. And I just absolutely rinsed those because there wasn't enough football on normal television to satisfy my voracious appetite for it.
He was obviously, as with any commentator, it's such a subjective thing, and they, particularly at the profile like you were talking about, there was no other option, so everybody had an opinion on him. And some, there were detractors. Some people would have said he lent a little bit too heavy on the stats, but to have been a commentator at the BBC for 50 years and an ability, I heard Mark Lawrenson talking about it this morning, an ability to capture the moment. I
think, it's not even just about capturing the moment, although that's obviously part of it. It's that commentary is also it's company. If you're watching a game on your own, or even if you're watching a game with other people, and what all the commentators of my childhood have that I don't think we have now. And it sounds, you don't want to be like the middle-aged man you're saying, well, when I was a lad and everything now is really crap. But if I think about the commentators who I grew up with, so that was mainly John Watson, Brian Moore, and Barry Davis, and also a bit of Peter Brackley. Those guys, they had character, they had personalities. You talk about Motson and the stats. I preferred Barry Davis. I thought Barry Davis was a cleverer commentator, more interesting to listen to. But Motson had personality. And so you felt like watching a game being done by Motson, you knew what you were going to get, and it felt good company. It was warming, it was comforting, it was exciting. And that, I think, is the major difference between those commentators and the commentators that we have now, where it all feels like it's find it much harder to differentiate between them, although I know what the voices are. And there aren't very many of them that I look forward to listening to. We've still got Clive Tildesley and Peter Drury, who, again, you may or may not like the way that they do it and their particular spin on what commentary is, but it feels like what you know what you're going to get from them, because it's going to be distinct from what you get from the other guys. And that level of personality gives you that gives you that ability to build a personal relationship with them, and as though you kind of know them, as though they're company, they're friends, whichever you want to look at it. And Motson absolutely had that, and it wasn't just because he was on all the time. He was on all the time because he had that.
Where does Motson sit in your all-time commentators for you?
Third or fourth, I would say, behind Barry Davis, Clive Tildesley, and Brian Moore. But the standard was high. So saying he was fourth isn't like saying he wasn't good, because just those other guys were also brilliant. So the standard, the same on the radio. I mean, I grew up listening to loads of radio and still do, and loved the radio commentaries. And the standard of the radio commentaries was also brilliant. You had Ron Jones, Peter Jones, Mike Ingham, Peter Slater, and that's just doing the football. You had loads of people that were excellent. So giving it a 1, 2, 3, 4, you could do it. But number 4 would still be really excellent.
We've been getting a bit of criticism in the comments this morning, Daniel, for our criticism of Jadon Sancho's performance last night. We weren't too impressed with his possession retention. Were we right?
No, he didn't. It wasn't a good night for him, but he still contributed to the first goal significantly with the kind of pass that you want to see him play, a fast attacking pass. He didn't play well, but I also felt like he didn't play well in the first half when United didn't have that much of the ball. So he's not someone you would expect to go and get the ball. He's someone who should have the ball given to him, and that didn't particularly happen. But ultimately, it's team game, and Fergie always used to say that you get a kind of performance where everyone plays well, hardly ever almost in your career. And so it wasn't for him, it wasn't his day to play well yesterday, but most of his mates did, so they got him out of it. And that's how teams work, and he still contributed. He still made one very significant contribution.
Anthony coming on for Weghorst at half-time, an obvious change and totally different style of players, but what for you did Ten Hag actually tactically change to improve the performance so quickly in the second half?
I think it's two things. You've got tactical changes, and then you've also got mental changes. You've got the change that he made where he swapped the front three around, where Rashford went up front and Weghorst came off, and then you had Sancho to the left, and Bruno in the middle and Anthony to the right. So you're just changing the questions that you're asking defenders, and you're changing the kind of combinations that the defenders are going to see. But I'm sure he's also telling them to play with greater intensity, to run faster, to run harder, because that's one of the things you know about United, that it's going to be physical. If you play this team, then they're going to ask you some physical questions. You're going to get tackled, and you're going to have to run. You're going to have to run fast and hard a lot. And they didn't do that enough in the first half. So there's the changes of personnel, and there's a change of tactics. And I think one of the things that United now have is when you have a lot of flexible attackers, you can just swap stuff around and see what works. And part of me is saying these are brilliant changes by Ten Hag. The way he reads the game is sensational, and it is. And there's like a voice in my head saying, well, why don't you get it right at the beginning then? So there is also a little bit of that. But when you have loads of flexible players, you have the options of swapping players on and off because you've got depth, and you've got options in terms of personnel, but you've also got options in terms of players who can play in 3 or 4 positions across the front. So if the first question, you get an answer to it, ask a different one. And Ten Hag isn't shy about changing the conversation in terms of the questions that he's asking, to torture the metaphor even further. And you're seeing differences when he does that, because you've got all these different players who have got really different and varied abilities. And so, okay, if Marcus Rashford's not working for him out on the left, well, then he can go up front. And then you can the combination play will change at that point as well. And I think that you have, particularly Bruno and Rashford, have a really good relationship on the pitch. So when they're near to each other, I think United are likely to be more dangerous.
He's also set a standard out now as being absolutely cutthroat. Like, he makes that substitution at half-time. I know you say, and John Giles would often say it on this show, if you're making that substitute early, that's more on you than it is on them. But equally, I mean, at that level, particularly that game last night, he's setting out a stall consistently now that he'll be cutthroat. And that's you can even listen to some of the players after the game last night. Like, that is a serious mindset shift for that group to be in now.
Well, I think the difference here, relative to all the other managers before, is that Ten Hag has options. So Ole used to cycle through the same players. He'd focus on the team, then he'd try, and it would usually have McFred in it because that was the only thing he could find that worked. It then wouldn't work, and then he'd cycle through some more options. Same with Mourinho, same with Van Gaal. Whereas the difference between them and Ten Hag is that there are tactical differences, I'm sure, and differences of coaching, but the real difference, the biggest single difference, is that Ten Hag signings have worked, all of them. And so because of that, it means that he's got more players. So he's got players that are able to cover up the errors that he might make, or just if the opposition are just defending well, then he's got options to change things. He's got options in defence as well. So the thing that he has that the other players don't have is proper competition for places, where if you don't play well, you got out, and if you get out, then the person that comes in, there's a good chance they're going to play well. And none of the other managers have had that because more or less they all made a mess of their signings.
Hasn't he shown more balls than all the other managers that were there before him as well? Like, I mean, the Ronaldo stuff is a really obvious one, but the easy thing to do last night was to not make that substitute at half time, because it encourages conversations like this where people go, well, maybe he got that wrong. But actually,
right, but imagine United get beat. If United get beat, then we're having a different conversation.
But the confidence and comfort to know that, it feels like he's running the clock. I mean, nobody's ever going to be Fergie again, but it feels like he's not worried. He's not looking over his shoulder in a way that a lot of the previous people in his position were.
100%. I said this to a friend last night. He is absolutely running thing. That he's in control of everything, and he's doing it in a different way to how Fergie did it, and a different way to lots of managers do it. His method seems to be that the players know that he means what he says and that he's tough, but also he just seems like a nice guy. The way that he interacts with the TV people, the media, the way that you just see him talking to people and about people, is that he's always poking the players and challenging them to do a little bit more, and that he's tough with them. But also, he's a nice guy and he's fair, and the things that he says happen. He's right most of the time with what he tells them to do. And with players, as soon as they start seeing results, they'll start thinking, well, I need to respect this guy because what he says is happening. He's making them better. And yeah, he's just in total control of the club. And he has been more or less since the time he arrived. He took those 2 games. And since then, United have been excellent. They've been saying that the form is championship form. And they've been doing things they haven't done for years. I mean, they just take this tie against Barcelona. They should have won the first leg and from behind, and they did win the second leg from behind. And the ability to retrieve those deficits, not to panic, to have faith in what you're doing, and to be able to execute under pressure is something that we haven't seen in a very long time.
You mentioned options there, Daniel. He has plentiful. What's your starting front three if everyone's fit and it's a big game?
It depends. I mean, because you could just pick the best players, and the best players is not Weghorst. So the best players probably, given the fact they have 17 players who are really good on the left wing, then it would be Rashford up front, Bruno in behind, Anthony on the left, Anthony on the right, and probably Sancho off the left. But when you pick a team, particularly if we got Sunday coming up in the cup final, you're not necessarily picking all the best players on the pitch at the beginning, because you're also thinking, I want my best players on the pitch for the last half an hour when the game might be in the balance. So you might hold players back and pick. Say he might. I'm not sure he'll pick Weghorst on Sunday, but if I was guessing, I'd say he would. And I don't think it's because he thinks that Weghorst is necessarily one of his best 11 players, but it's what Weghorst does that enables the other players to play well. But also that if you've got Sancho and Garnacho on the bench, let's say, then those are very significant changes to introduce to a game after an hour when the opposition are tiring, particularly if there's a possibility that game might go to extra time. Yeah, because it feels like he's almost, I don't know if it's purposely, but he's not starting with his strongest 11. When I saw Weghorst in the team last night, I was thinking Garnacho's right there and he's playing well. But is that almost an extra string to the bow that if we play well with Weghorst, then bring on Garnacho, we're actually better again? Yeah, and I think Garnacho and Sancho have both played really well recently, and Garnacho's been good all season, but it has generally been off the bench. Sancho was brilliant against Leeds, but was off the bench. Garnacho in particular, I think, is just someone you don't want to face as a substitute because he's so fast, so direct and so fearless. And Sancho also is interesting just because there aren't players around like him. So you get used to playing against one player, and then if you suddenly toss Sancho into that mix after an hour, the challenge of facing him is totally different to the challenge of facing whoever he's replaced. And football matches last 90 minutes, 95 minutes or whatever, and you want to take advantage of all those minutes. So I think that it makes sense to keep on the bench players who you think can make a very significant change, particularly if those players are currently showing you that off the bench might be where they're best.
Anthony's finish last night, superb. Do you get the criticism of Anthony?
Not really. As in, he's come without a pre-season to a new country, to a new league, and there's been a World Cup, and he's been injured, and he's scoring and creating goals. So I watch him and I think there's a lot of improvement that you need to do, but also there's a lot of improvement I think will come, and also he's quite good already. He's 23. Yesterday was his birthday. He's 23. He scored, I think, 7 goals this season. You saw the goal he scored last night in a big game against Barcelona. So I think what Anthony gives you on a bad day is that he's not scared. You can always give him the ball, and he will take the ball, and he will take time and heat out of the game because he's able to hang on to the ball and people will kick him and he's not bothered. So he gives you that toughness and that nastiness and that ability to retain possession. He also stretches the play and gives United some width and gives them a threat down the right-hand side. He's good at pressing. He gives them a lot out of possession, a lot going backwards, and he can be involved in goals. And these are just, this is on a bad day. On a good day, he gives you obviously a lot more. And things that haven't been working perfectly for him yet. But what I thought we saw last night, and we haven't seen this consistently, is that he was running in behind. He was looking to put the ball behind his men, beat them for pace on the outside, come on the inside and go past people. He's slowed it down a little bit, I think, this season up until this point. But his performance last night, I thought was really encouraging because he was also looking to be a little bit more proactive in possession, a little bit quicker in possession. And the criticism of Anthony, like they said on BT afterwards, that this might be a turning point for him, and he doesn't need a turning point. He scored on his debut, and he's been either injured or pretty good since then. And I think he's been good in the last few games too. So it felt like this whole thing was confected because he did that trick that some people didn't like in that game the day the Queen died. And I totally didn't see it. I didn't see it even with the trick. That I thought what he was trying to do was trying to misdirect the opposition by spinning. Then he played a pass and the pass was off. But the conception of the trick and what it was trying to achieve was that it was misdirection. You're looking over there and I'm going to put the ball over here was actually quite clever. And I didn't have a problem with him doing it. And then he got substituted and people said, Ten Hag has hooked him because of that. But Ten Hag hooked him because he was resting him. It was clearly one of those things that was planned. I think Ten Hag even said as much afterwards. But the media somehow confected this whole controversy about Anthony's spin, and therefore people didn't appreciate him and the crowd didn't like it. And this whole thing is just total nonsense. He's contributing absolutely loads to the team, which is why this manager, who 10 minutes ago we were just talking about is ruthless, there's competition for places, almost always picks him when he's fit because he gives the team a balance and an intensity that other players don't. And he's the best right winger that United have, and United have some players who can play that role well.
Well, I mean, the media picked up on that because it was an easy thing to pick up on.
It was also weird. It was also
well,
weird.
no, but it was. I mean, look, that's what those little moments are what football is about. And you remember Andrei Kanchelskis standing on the ball at Rangers with the salute.
I wouldn't blast him for it, but in my opinion, it was a bit weird.
But I think the criticism of Anthony is that he's so predominantly left-footed that sometimes he slows down attacks because he goes back on his left foot, like the way Antonio Valencia used to be completely right-footed. Isn't that the way?
So Ten Hag talked about this, and he said he can come on the inside, he can go on the outside, he can beat people for pace, and he needs to do it more. So I agree with you that this is a weakness in his game. But from what Ten Hag said, it needn't be a weakness. And last night, actually, I felt was really encouraging in that aspect because we saw a bit more variety and we saw him speeding the game up rather than slowing it down. The ability to slow it down, don't get me wrong, is helpful. But when you're under pressure or when you want to take some heat or some time out of the game, the ability to slow it down and hang on to the ball is an important one. But I agree with you, Colm, that he does need to speed the game up, and he does need to trust his ability on his right foot because he needs to ask defenders a different question. And we've seen it with Rashford playing on the left, that once defenders knew that he wasn't just going to go inside and he had the tricks, the pace and the will really to go on the outside, he became a totally different proposition to mark. And from what Ten Hag says, Anthony is capable of that. And I felt like we started to see that last night, but as you said, the finish, the ability to sort of march onto a finish and punch it when it's in the air like that, is a very significant one, and is occasionally you see players who become known for a very particular kind of thing. So Coutinho had that finish where he would curl it into the top corner from outside the box on the left-hand side. And Anthony, he has his finish and his ability to execute it in all different sorts of circumstances with composure and accuracy is useful. So it is a weakness that he only comes inside, but when he does it, he can still do it very effectively. And if he's starting to add that ability to go on the outside and to do different things, and I think we're seeing that, then it will immediately make the fact that he can go on the inside and that he's so good at it an even more significant strength than before.
There was a 1-2 between Garnacho and Fred with about 10 minutes to go last night that really should have, it was a thing of absolute beauty. It really should have resulted in a goal. And I did wonder when you couple, maybe less so the impact of Garnacho, but certainly of Anthony, and looking ahead to Sunday and the cup final, Daniel, if you felt that, like, you know, in terms of team selection, we've obviously touched on Sancho and touched on Weghorst, but are they two players that come into the reckoning on Sunday?
I'd be amazed if Garnacho started that game, just because he's such a good substitute. He's been better from the bench than starting. I guess the options are Rashford will start and Bruno will start, and I think Anthony will probably start. And then I would imagine it's a toss-up between Weghorst and Sancho. I would probably go Sancho because although everything that I said about keeping good players in reserve, there's the other part of me that says just pick the best players on the pitch and then take it from there. I think it will be Weghorst though, because I think that United will want to start fast, but they'll also be aware that they might have a big physical and emotional dump from beating Barcelona. So they might get a foothold in the game first and then try and really go away in the second half. And I think that's one of the things we've been seeing a lot of United recently, that because they've been playing so many games, you can't go flat out in all the games. And it feels like the first half has been a period where they're establishing themselves into a game before they really stamp on the gas in the second half. So I wouldn't be surprised if it continued like that. That would be my guess.
And they end the 6-year drought?
I
guaranteed.
So.
Nick Pope is out. Absolutely guaranteed.
Newcastle was a difficult game. They've got their own sense of destiny.
We have an expression over here, Daniel, called plum-arsing, which is buttering us up. Come on.
I think United should win. They should have beaten Newcastle at home earlier in the season. They didn't. But Newcastle look like they've run out of a bit of form over the last few weeks, and United are still running into it. But you look at, they're a team that can hurt you. Alexander Isak is an excellent player. Bruno Guimaraes is an excellent player, and they're good at the back. So in a final, in a tight game, it's ridiculous. Like, those teams can beat you. I think that United should be motivated by the potential shame of losing to Newcastle and the fuss that will be made about them winning their first trophy since 1969. I mean, that would be a very significant shame for those players to be their patsies. But I think United will win. I expect them to win. They should win. But the idea that it's a gimme against a really good team who will be motivated like you wouldn't believe is not the case. But United should win. And I think I always look at them and I think that triumvirate that they've got, the two centre-backs and Casemiro, make it really difficult for any team to beat them. Like, turning up at any game with those three is like walking into a pub and saying, right, now who wants some? And it's a real statement of those three players are hard, fast, talented, brilliant, and it's really hard to see any team beating United when those three are on the pitch. They will be on the pitch, so United should win, but Newcastle absolutely have the players to keep them out and to score and to make it a really hard game. They're good.
Right, enjoy. We'll catch up with you next week. Thanks, Daniel.
See you again, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
We shall see how that goes. It is 8:38. Up next, Alan Quinlan in the studio to review and look ahead to the weekend Six Nations action. First of all, you're going to hear a clip from the Six Nations show. Keith Wood talking about Gavin Coombs being left out of the squad for Italy.
They'll be picking holes as well when you're wandering around Killaloo tomorrow as well, and they're going, what about Gavin Coombs? What about Gavin Coombs?
Yeah, Gavin Coombs scores a lot of short tries. He is incredibly effective for Munster. I think he dropped away a chunk last year. I thought he when he came on the Munster scene, he did incredibly well. He dropped away a bit in standard. I think he lost his confidence a little. I think he's coming back into it. I don't know that he's at the level that we're seeing on the team at the moment. And so it is a big hill for him to climb with the quality of the players that are there ahead of him. So you're looking for a player to be involved at the heightened level of Van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, and also, again, Grace mentioned it, having Jack Conan coming back in, getting his confidence as the line's number 8. We need a backup to Caelan Doris because he is absolute standout. And I think Jack Conan's getting the opportunity. He needs to take it because Coombs is breathing down his neck. But Coombs needs to play at a really heightened standard now because some of the quality that we've been seeing for the last few weeks is incredible.
You can check out that full chat with Keith Wood and Nathan on the show last night. Check up on our YouTube channel. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you?
Good. 20-9 this morning, and it's a bit more rugby chat obviously for the weekend that's in it. We'll pick up on the point that was been made there about Gavin Coombs. Definitely one of the ones that can feel a little bit hard done by not being in the 23 at least.
Yeah, I think a little bit, but he's been playing very well, and that's all he can do really. There's obviously a fair bit of debate going on. I think the quality of the back rows is was a very high standard, and he went back and played last week at 3 tries, 23 carries, lots of tackles, and I think it's probably a little bit unfair. I've said it a few times about consistency and just seeing that constant energy and all that kind of stuff. I think he's shown that. I think when you get up to international level, you have to sometimes you need a little bit of a steer as to, obviously his big strength, he's physical, he's powerful, he's a real good carrier, but I think the rest of his game has improved dramatically as well. So yeah, you can feel a little bit hard done by that he's not getting a chance. You think, would it give him a real confidence booster to be on the bench and coming off the bench in Rome? But it's I think Andy Farrell is really respecting Italy, and obviously the break in between doesn't help players who are thinking we want to get in for the Italian game, because everybody had a week off last week. You can refresh, but look, he's playing very well, and that's all he can do is keep knocking on the door. And if he has a really strong finish between now and the end of the season with Munster, well, he'll get more attention. And I think I know for a fact, I don't know for a fact, but I know Paul O'Connell so well, and I know that he'll be giving him sort of feedback on what he wants and needs, and what he's seeing at the moment is a really involved Gavin Coombs throughout games for 80 minutes, which is what you want. Look at Caelan Doris and just the amount of involvements, the carries, the turnovers, the tackles, the clean outs, the breakdown. He's the full package really, and that's why he's at the level he's at, and people are talking about him in World Rugby about how good he is for Ireland. Himself and Gavin Coombs would be a frightening prospect playing together, and if Gavin Coombs can keep going, because as I said, he just has that incredible power that we've spoken about we lacked on occasions before in forward packs.
We chat about the player who has slightly underperformed, which has been the case with him, was in the Novembers, whatever it was, against the Murray side that came over, and he maybe underperformed and people had sort of written him off, and so he gets the feedback, he takes it away, he works on it, he becomes a better player, he's working on all those things. But isn't there also because we talk about that in cliches, we say he got all the feedback, he worked on his stuff, and he deserves a shot now. But the reality, of course, is that he could go away, work on all the stuff, become the best version of himself, and there still might not be room for him in the squad. It's this close to
if you keep for World Cup, look, I think he'll be in a World Cup squad if he keeps going, because I think he gives you that dynamic and something really, really different as regards the power. Regardless, getting into starting team, it's very difficult because Josh van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, Peter O'Mahony, Jack Conan are the perceived 4, and they've proven themselves, and they've obviously a lot of experience and played very well. If there's a little dip, yeah, for sure, he's next kind of knocking on the door. Ryan Baird is another option at 6. He's played really well for Leinster. He's on the bench at the weekend with Peter O'Mahony, but if you're Peter O'Mahony and you get knocked out of the squad and Gavin Coombs comes in, it's brilliant as regards for Gavin Coombs, but it
would have been the easy thing to do.
Possibly, yeah.
You're flying it.
Yeah,
you're now,
Pete,
lads,
we know what you can do. Yeah,
take a bit of a breather here, and it would have been that was kind of thing that stood out for me. It was the easy call.
They could have put him in, but the way when you're winning, and things are going well, and he makes lots of the decisions that he's made in recent times have worked, and even the balance of the team here at the weekend. It's incredible to think that you've Ronan Kelleher, Bundy Aki, Ian Henderson,
Jack Conan
and Jack Conan. They're 4 British and Irish lines. Okay, Ronan Kelleher didn't play, but he got called into the squad, and that's the level he's at. You could argue these 4 guys wouldn't start if everyone was available, which shows the depth that he's created. So he's got to be respectful, and I'm sure Peter Matty wouldn't be too pleased, but I'm sure Gavin Coombs, I love the fact that he went back to last week and he performed. He looks like he's happy and comfortable in his own skin, and probably too much made of the performance of the Ireland A side against that New Zealand select in November, because they all played poorly, and I think even Nick Timoney has suffered a little bit since, and
but equally
that's the kind of ruthless nature of that.
What do you do if you're the coach? You have to go on evidence.
And that's the level it's at, and that's when you hear the word ruthless, the international level, and the opportunities and chances don't come around. So you have to take them, but he's fought his way back and been very consistent. So credit to him for that.
You mentioned the 4 inclusions there: Henderson, Conan, Kelleher, Aki, along with the half-back partnership, Casey and Byrne. Like, what's the ultimate goal here for those 6 this weekend? If they play extremely well, are they in contention to start against Scotland in 2 weeks, or is the team just too good?
That's what Andy Farrell would like, that they go out and perform and kind of give him a headache when he's picking the team, and then you're kind of down to split decisions of your gut feeling as regards. You don't want your coach picking you on gut, but sometimes it can affect you, it can work in your favour if you are one of those players who I think with Tyke burnout, you would expect Ian Henderson to finish out the championship with James Ryan in the second row. Ryan Baird might have something to say about that.
The last few weeks you've been very effusive about putting Baird in there.
Yeah, I think it would have been a great opportunity, but the problem is Ian Henderson hasn't played games with Ireland recently, so he deserves. It's a kind of a catch-22. I'd love if Ian Henderson been started. I would have started Ryan Baird and say, right, go out with a strong team around you and show us what you can do here.
We don't know his ceiling yet.
I think it can be very, very high. I think it can be very, very high. He's got bigger. He's more physical. He's incredible athleticism. But it's for Colm, for all those players, like Bundy Aki hasn't played a lot of rugby. I'm sure he's been a little bit frustrated with what's gone on at Connacht and not playing a lot of games. He's been absolutely brilliant every time he's played for Ireland, so I think he'd look for a big game. Rossburn and Casey, different kind of scenarios for them. They're both really kind of on the up, and I think Rossburn has shown, and everybody's really pleased, incredibly delighted with the way he played against France. And for a long period of that game, probably 30 minutes of that game, looked very controlled, composed. I mentioned the word ruthlessness. You look back 4 years ago when they play England, and he's playing in World Cup warm-up, and then after in the Six Nations, there's one after that as well, where Ireland are pretty dominant in both those games, and he kind of suffers. But as an out half, if your forwards are not working, they're getting physically dominated, it's very difficult. So it's a real win-win situation for them. The only danger with going to Italy is you can expect too much sometimes outside of the group. I think Ireland will be unbelievably satisfied with a result here. Obviously, as a coach, Andy Farrell and the rest of the coaches want a good performance, but they've proven in the last 12 months that they're a dangerous side, they're a different prospect. They can play rugby. If you stand off them, they can actually hurt you and punish you, and it isn't all kind of up in the air and passion and emotion, which many times I went to France or to Italy, and that's what I remember being involved in a match one time when Diego Dominguez, he kicked the ball off at the start of the game and he kicked it 2 yards, so the referee had to award a scrum. Ireland had a scrum from the kickoff, so he just kicked it 2 yards forward. Everybody stopped and the referee had to award a scrum because it didn't go 10 yards. They wanted to have a scrum against Ireland
straight away
to try and, even though they were giving us the scrum, just to go at Ireland, physically say, well, we're going to beat you in the scrum and we're going to attack you up front and we're going to be so physical today, we're going to make life hell for you. you know, that worked to a point, but if you were patient and you matched that physicality, you would wear them out in the end. This team can play rugby, and I think
they needed Dominguez at out half, which would probably bring.
Well, Garbisi is coming back from is a really good player. You look at the rest of the back line they have: Ignacio Brex, Menoncello, the two centres. They're superb players. Pierre Bruno comes in. I look at that back line and I think there's a fair bit of danger there. Padovani, who scored that try last year
after
against
the
Wales,
Caparazzo run,
yeah. Stephen Varney at 9. Hesitancy, couple of mistakes against France. I think if they can, you know, he's a very good player as well. And now, I think not alone have they kind of a good, robust pack of forwards, but they're quite skillful. The back row, Canone, Lamaro and Negri, they're really top quality. So they've proven it. They've beaten Wales, they've beaten Australia in November, they beat Samoa, they ran France close. So you have to respect them. And the biggest challenge here is the complacency thing. So it's another challenge for Ireland.
Can I ask you one more just about the back row, just that shuffle? So Conor obviously at 8, Doris slips across then to the blind side. So like you already mentioned about obviously his quality, world class in his normal position, but like what are the limitations now when he goes to 6? Or like
there's no limitations because I just think he's a wonderful footballer.
So he can play the same game in that
but I think it's a really good move from Andy Farrell, because if Caelan Doris was injured in the morning and you're suddenly springing Jack Conan in for a starting match, maybe a year or two that he hasn't done that. He's come off the bench in New Zealand.
He hasn't played against one of the top tier nations in a year, I think.
Yeah, so him starting a game here, you would hope. I think that the fact is that if there was a problem with Doris, that you now have a guy who has a lot of credit in the bank here, and you're just kind of reigniting that bit of confidence again. So if it happened at a World Cup game. So Jack Conan is still a top quality player. I think he's a load of energy. His ability to carry is superb as well. So and that's one of Gavin Coombs' problems. You have 2, 3, 4 players. I experienced it myself in my career. You know, the 2009 back row, I was trying to get into the 23, but there's just so much depth and quality of players, and it's always happened. So it's difficult for him, but for Jack Conan, this is a real chance, and I think it's a really shrewd selections. I think the one area, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, was Gary Ringrose. If Gary Ringrose doesn't play, how does that affect your whole attack? You know, it's Robbie Henshaw's played there, and Aki have played in the centre before and done very well. Anton Frisch is someone who's probably showing glimpses and signs that he can play that position very well. I think he's an outstanding player, and you know, obviously France have been trying to get him back, but I think, you know, he went on that Emerging Ireland tour and he's played really well for Munster, not just last week, but for a fair period of time now. So he could be someone that could challenge for a World Cup if you're talking about a bolter. But complacency is the key here, and I think Ireland will be very mindful of that. I can imagine Paul O'Connell, well, Andy Farrell and Paul O'Connell and the rest of the coaches, but
hammering it into them.
Well, yeah, it's just, look, and sometimes you can do everything right and you can get a flat performance, or things can, but the expectation here this time, you know, I would have been in the last number of years working in these games or being a player, you know, the feel-good factor here afterwards is winning by 20 or 30 points and scoring lots of tries and getting out of Rome and being happy and joyful. This, I think tomorrow, people shouldn't be expecting. It could happen that Ireland win by 20, 30 points. But I think 10, 12 point win here is a good result.
Yeah, well, they should have beaten France.
Yeah, and I think, look, maybe that'll be to Ireland's benefit. They won't in any way underestimate him, and I think the selection has reflected that.
Justin Flynn on YouTube says, if Coombs wants to improve his Ireland chances, he needs to move to Leinster. This is the type of banter rivalry that we're here for.
I know. Would he get on Leinster then with all the players? So he's going to Doris, Van der Fleer, Conan.
Justin Flynn is thinking about it that deeply. I think he's having a pop.
But so, enforced changes aside for Scotland, would you be making any replacements here for that game based on tomorrow? Like, i.e., if someone performs extraordinarily well that's coming into the team, would they stick in the team against Scotland, or was the France performance just so good that you can't change unless you have to, unless it's enforced?
It's getting tighter and tighter, and you're getting into a situation now that if the team keep performing, it's harder to get it. It's getting harder and harder to get into that side, I think.
And that's difficult for those players coming in, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it's when the coach sits down and talks to his squad and players, and if he wants to talk to them and say, look, that they've got to keep a high level, that there's people chomping on at the bit here to get into the side. And I think Andy Farrell would love to have a situation where players feel they're not being dropped, but there's a bit of rotation going on, and that comes with depth, Colm. Do you know what I mean? When you have the opportunity to bring in like-for-like players who can bring a little bit of different dynamic, nobody will want to go out of the side. And that may happen in the next few months. You know, like if Robbie Henshaw plays instead of Stuart McCluskey against Scotland or England, well, is there anyone going to say that the team performance is going to dip? Or, you know, because McCluskey, you think, has kind of earned the right to be really in the conversation now, you know. There's a couple of areas, like I said, if Gary Ringrose doesn't play, it's a problem. Ryan Baird, you know, someone who could really enhance his chances here if he gets on Saturday to play against Scotland. A different sort of a game, probably not, to be careful what way I say this, but you're not playing England, that power, that South Africa, and you could sense that it's going to be incredible pace to that game in Murrayfield. So the door is closing a little bit, but I think, you know, but the great thing is the depth on the bench. And even if you look at the bench, you know, you've Dan Sheehan coming off the bench at the weekend. Kilcoyne, Tom O'Toole did really well against France. O'Mahony, Baird. You have guys coming off the bench now with experience who feel they should be on the team, and they've legitimate rights to kind of argue that and really make an impact.
Every second round you insist we mention the under-20s for whatever reason, Quinny. I don't know why that might be, but are you on duty for any of that?
I'm not doing the 20s, but
I saw Evan O'Connell in one of the papers this morning saying that the uncle has given him a lot of feedback, clips, sending him clips of sessions that they're doing at the senior level. That's an unbelievable resource to be able to tap into.
It is, yeah. It's a very good squad, and I think probably the physical size of some of the players is incredible here, and traditionally, you know, we would have been a little bit different in the genetics over the years. You know, England always can pick a big side, France always can pick a big side, but they're a very good team. I think they've played really well in the, you know, obviously the first one in Wales, the first half wasn't their best performance. I think the reaction and the resilience they showed in Cork for the second game against France, really that was a very, very powerful, good French side, and they probably got away with one there in the end, with Sam Prendergast's penalty at the end. But going to Italy is another great opportunity for them to grow. He's picked the same team, a little bit of continuity, which I think Richie Murphy has made 3, 4, 5 changes in nearly every game I've seen the last couple of years, but he's gone for a bit of consistency here and feeling that the performance in Cork, they can take something and get better out of that. But they're in a great position now to possibly challenge. But the Italy under-20s team is going to be difficult. This is going to be really challenging. They lost narrowly to France in round 1 and England in round 2, so it'll be interesting. But there's some really good players there. You know, you mentioned Sam Prendergast, the middle 5, Diarmuid Mangan, Conor O'Tiernig, James McNabney, Ruan Quinn, Brian Gleeson. They're athletes. They're seriously good rugby players.
They're a good team to watch.
The captain is a brilliant player as well, Gus McCarthy, and Paddy McCarthy, who's Joe's brother as well, has been doing really. So there's a lot of really good players. Evan O'Connell, as you said, being able to chat with with his uncle, and Danny Sheehan, Jacob Sheehan, they're Frankie's nephews. So I keep getting reminded of them. If I was doing this, it's probably Donal Lenihan now for RTE who's going to be getting. I'm not sure if Donal is doing the game, but we're obviously sharing the Six Nations version on RTE, so we don't have this one. But I'm going to Cardiff to do Wales England. So, but I'll be watching the 20s because I think, you know, they play a brand For anyone who doesn't, hasn't seen the first couple of games, it's incredibly exciting. They're not restricted in what they do, if you like. There's a lot of off the cuff. Take on your opposite man, run at them, try and keep the ball alive. So the 20s rugby and games have been brilliant so far.
Quinlan, enjoy the rugby over the weekend. Catch up with you.
Cheers.
Monday.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks a million. And it is nearly 9 o'clock. You're watching OTB AM, and we have loads still to come. We've Liam Griffin standing by to chat about his motion to Congress last weekend, and plenty more as well. The Firepit to come too, and we'll be catching up with Aisling, who's in Rome ahead of that game at the weekend. Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. The football kick-off from 11:30 this morning. Joe in conversation with Ruby Walsh from 1. Galway, the subject of Mount Rushmore at 3. Pat Fenlon at 4 o'clock. And the Irish football special with Kevin Kilbane in conversation with Messrs Quinn, McAteer and Given. That's all from 6. And you can follow OTB across social. Subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network. Up next, we've the All-Ireland winning manager Liam Griffin. First of all, before that, during the ad, you can hear Sarah O'Donovan. She was talking about why she had more fun playing for Dublin rather than Cork. And it's all part of the OTB Games Room in partnership with Virgin Media. Bring your A game with 99.9% broadband reliability.
OTB AM.
OTB Sports Rugby.
I think Ross, I haven't had a fight with him yet. Over the last few years, I've probably played most of my rugby under Ross at 10s. Probably the media were a bit harsh on him over the last few years, because from what I saw inside the doors of Leinster and Ireland was someone who's calm and can make plays happen. Everyone, I think, is really comfortable with him on both teams.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
And do you get actual caps?
They do now.
You
didn't then.
We should start a little campaign to get your 3 caps. You have your All-Ireland medals, though.
I do. They're safely.
How many All-Ireland medals?
I've 2 senior All-Ireland medals at Cork.
That was the most outrageous shot there's ever been in this game. So the camogie worked out in the end, at least.
It did. Now, I had the most crack when I came to Dublin, I think. I was a little older and I understood it better.
I was going to say, because they didn't take it as seriously.
Well, because I was finished going out. So I was 30 years of age. I didn't need to be out every weekend. We obviously took the games very seriously during championship.
You officially had to transfer. A lot of controversy, I'm sure.
Nobody wants a
front page of the papers.
Nobody wants a 30-year-old in Cork. If you look at the age of the Cork squads, they're young, sprightly little things. So
well, the Dubs obviously wanted you.
As I said, it's not as competitive.
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
It's got 9 o'clock OTB AM. Loads of comments coming into us. Hopefully get to those before we leave you at 10 this morning. Myself and Colm with you until 10. Delighted to say that we're joined on the line now by Liam Griffin. Good morning, Liam.
Guys, how are you?
Thanks for patiently standing by there as we chatted a bit about the rugby.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. Very good.
We wanted to chat to you a little bit. We were paying attention. It was this day last week, I think, that the motion came up about the possibility for clubs all over the country to be mandated to field hurling teams from under 7, I think, through to under 10s. It got 35% support at Congress, so was rejected. Why do you think it came up short?
I think it came up short for a few reasons. I think at convention generally, unless it's a slam dunk, it struggles. But the reason I think that it didn't get a little bit more was because the first 10 motions were deferred, and the first motion taken was that motion. Now, for the first motion at Congress, people are not going to be very vociferous for a while unless something happens. And it was called the call and the count was done before there was a debate, and I think it was worthy of a debate. And I don't know why the GA wouldn't want a debate on such an issue, because it was a very benign attempt to try and get hurling to grow the game of hurling, and it's not widely known, it might be widely known, but hurling is one of the few games, and the GA is parish rule. So if your club doesn't have a hurling team, you actually can't play for anybody else. And that's absolutely crazy, because if you're playing rugby or soccer or Ludo or darts, I don't care what it is, you can play, you can go to play. But we actually forbid you to play if you're not playing, if your club doesn't have a hurling team. And I was concerned because I saw the Sheffield University brought out they did a study on Irish sport. And hurling, our native game, dropped out of the top 10 And that's absolutely crazy. Now, that's an issue for the GAA, and we're not tackling it properly, in my opinion. I'm not saying it's done out of evil intent. We've bound ourselves up in rules that mean that we actually have sidelined hurling. And if you want to have good hurling, and if you want to have standards in hurling, you have to grow the volume. And also, if you are from another county and you have a chance to learn hurling at an early age, because you won't learn hurling very, very well after you get past the age of 12 or 13. There are outliers, but you won't do it very well. So, and then if you go to live in another county that has hurling, you just can't play because you haven't had the skill set. So we're giving young kids a chance to play hurling. And I think young boys everywhere in the country and the island of Ireland should have the opportunity of playing hurling and shouldn't be barred from playing hurling by our own rules, because it makes no sense. It's not good for us. And I think the fact that it was dropped out of the top 10 was the reason why I brought that motion forward.
From the opposition's perspective, Liam, why do you think it was rejected, the motion? What was their motivation?
I don't know, because why wouldn't you debate that? It's just saying, can we play hurling and can we... Because don't forget, back in the 40s and the 50s and all through there in the 60s, we didn't have all this emphasis on coaching. We now have an awful lot of GPOs or GPAs all over the country. And we are now well equipped to try and take it on board within the coaching framework. And we are in a position, therefore, to coach coaches in clubs if they wish to do it. So I think there's a feeling that people do think that people that think they can win an All-Ireland senior football final or an All-Ireland club football, there's some clubs don't want hurling within there in case that deflects from what they want to do. But hurling is actually great training for football. Now, football is good for endurance training for hurling, but for eye-hand coordination, for all of that type of thing and the speed of the game, it has actually got a lot of merit even for football. And we didn't try to get controversial, whereby we were bringing it up as far as competition level. So it's not even impeding competition. It's just to give children a chance to play the game of hurling in their own country. I mean, I said it before, I wasn't trying to be smart. Kate Middleton has got more training for hurling than some young boys in Ireland. And so also, I thought you got this guy from China. Muhammad Ali got a bit of a few sticks. You know what I mean? So why cannot, if you have a child and you live in a county, why can't he play the game of hurling? And that's the question that has to be answered by the GAA.
So, obviously, when you look at it at a senior level, there are a very limited number of counties that can, whatever, but competing for an All-Ireland, but compete at any sort of a Tier A, Tier B at senior hurling. And obviously, this would have a knock-on on that. What was the essence of your thinking about it, Liam? Was it to do with trying to get a hurl into the hands of kids as a national game? It's fallen outside the top 10, or was it to try and address the other, maybe more Hollywood aspect to it?
No, it wasn't. It was to try and get young. I played hurling from a young age, and I was in a football club. And Wexford were at their height when I was a young lad. I used to hurl against the wall and do all that. We had to give walkovers when I was over the age of national school, because a lot of us didn't go to secondary school. So I loved the game of hurling, and I also played a lot more football than I played hurling. And what I'm saying is, it's a special skill, and when you master it and you get very good at it and your skill set comes along, it's very rewarding. It's just it's a great sport to be able to conquer. And why shouldn't every young boy and girl separately, but I'm not representing Camogie, why shouldn't every young boy get an opportunity to be able to play hurling? So we were saying, if you do have a football team and it's in a town, let's say, and you don't have a hurling team, well, you let your kids go to the nearest hurling people who have some facility for hurling, and you have only a handful of kids. That means they can cross over from one club without losing their club status, and they can still go back and play football for their own club. So it's not a very, very difficult thing to do, and that's a fact. Now, the other point is that we do think that this may come before the Games Committee, and the only good thing about the 35%, and by the way, without a debate, that was a serious amount of to get at 35%. Now, if we could get the debate and say, right, let's have an open debate on hurling. And I'm saying, start with the kids anyway. And we've lost 3 years since I started on this. So we've 3 years lost. So the boy now that was 9 is 12, and the boy that was 12, whatever, they're going up in age. So we're missing years as we do it. And hurling needs to, if it's outside the top 10, is that a crisis or for an organisation? I think it is, because at the top end, we have between the age of 21 and 26 a 70% dropout in Gaelic football and a 60% dropout in hurling. So at the top end and at the bottom end, we are actually we're losing down. We're pressing down on the numbers playing when we need to grow the numbers. It was said a few years back that to produce one serious player in Wimbledon, you'd have to have 5,000 players or something like that to get really up to that standard. So what's wrong with trying to raise the amount of people who play the game and give them the satisfaction? And if they go to another county, supposing they go to Dublin to work, which a lot of young guys do, wouldn't it be nice to have a hurling skill step when you get there and you could play with another club?
Yeah, well, I'm involved in one of the bigger Dublin clubs at a very under sort of academy level, under sixes, and you see the kids that have a real, and it's at that age it's easy to kind of manage both the hurling and the football, because it's not really, you're not doing any serious training. It's like a run out on a Saturday morning. But you can see the kids that are really embracing the hurling side of it are coming from houses from that have parents from Galway or from Cork or from Kilkenny. You can really see that it's the passion for it begins at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not saying this to be boastful. I spent over 20 years coaching kids, and I absolutely loved it. I ran my own leagues and things. And we brought in kids from all walks and creeds and came into play. And some of them played for Wexford eventually, and two of them won Ireland senior medals in the end. So, like from that point of view, you look at Turin, and I give Turin Team of the Year this year because they don't have all the riches in Mayo. And I thought they put up a fantastic display in an All-Ireland intermediate final, which Naas won last year, by the way, and they struggled with their hurling. And it's a great credit to Naas that they could win an All-Ireland, an intermediate title. Turin were beaten, and in the last minute, it was 4 minutes extra time, and 2.5 of those were taken off by something that's an illegal part of our game. That's the rucks. Rucks that are being formed in hurling. Now, they're now actually doing the analysis on the rucks, which is changing the shapes of the players. So from the rucks point of view, that was held up by 2 minutes or approximately, or a minute and a half in the extra time, just throwing the ball back into a crowd again. That's not even legal. So Turin, I thought, were fantastic. So if they can do it, and they can develop their hurling, and they are a hurling club, if they can do that without the kind of infrastructure around them within their own county to play the game, that's a better achievement than Limerick winning an All-Ireland final, to be quite honest. So we need to actually see, as there are outliers out there that love the game of hurling that we could bring on, and why can't we start with the children? I want to know, not trying to dictate to anybody, but why can't we have every young child exposed to the game of hurling? And why can't we remove the barriers?
Well, one of the reasons, and I canvassed a couple of people during the week from traditional counties that would have inter-county careers and are coaching at a younger level. One of the reasons that was brought up was a time issue, so that it was very difficult to give equal quality time to kids at that age at both codes.
I don't accept that. If you're training for hurling, you're actually training for football as well. Football is great for endurance in hurling. It's not great for strength is in every club now. So you need endurance, strength and speed. Now, if you need endurance, strength and speed for all sports, hurling is very good for that. And I think that it would be an asset if it's managed properly. And it needs to be managed properly. But I'm still saying, why can't we give and expose every child and make a pathway that you could play hurling if you want to? No one's trying to force anyone into the field. And we're not interfering with anybody else's competitions if you start young. So are they afraid if you start young, they might stay playing it? So
yeah, I'd say you've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, if you want to win a football championship in your own county at the price of not letting people play hurling, I don't think it's worth winning.
Well, we have a tiny country with massive sporting participation across a number of sports, and people, they make decisions, don't they? I mean, like I'm listening to you here, Liam, and it's fascinating, and so many people will be on board with you. But what's the alternative plan here? So the motion got rejected in Congress. How do you organically motivate increased hurling participation across the country? What's the next step?
Well, you have to give people an opportunity to play it. First of all, do they have the opportunity? Is there a facility for them to go and play the game of hurling? And if not, can they go to some other club? Because the parish rule forbids you to play for another club. That's happened in several counties. So the reason that I would like to see it is to just give people a chance to learn to play the game, because it's a very good game. And we are a national game. Hurling and football are our national sports. But we can't have we can't call ourselves truly national sports if we're not going to give every child in the nation a chance to play it. And we've got a responsibility as a GA to develop the game of hurling.
And the plan is to try and back channel it, Liam, and try and come at it from another direction. Is that the takeaway?
Come at it from another direction, and then hopefully that leads on to some other directions as well, and some other initiatives. But just let them play is what I'd say. Why not let them play the game? That's it. And I mean, why, if they can go play rugby and soccer, and is it any wonder then that you'll be losing numbers at the bottom? And I'm just saying we can't afford to lose numbers at the bottom if we really want to develop the game.
Yeah, it did strike me that as you were chatting there with James Cahill on the hurling pod during the week, and he was saying that hurling is an infinitely more skillful sport than football, which he said had about 4 skills, and after that you'd be well able to master it, which I presume is anything you'd endorse.
I wouldn't endorse that either, because it's not us football or hurling. It's both. That both should be cherished, if you want to use that metaphor, and actually try to spread it. And is the will there to spread the game of hurling? And is the will, like, really, essentially, as you've already said, the All-Ireland Championship is probably a misnomer. It should be a blitz of 12 teams at the very top of the elite level, and maybe a blitz of 8 teams or even 10 teams.
Very simply,
so,
sorry, go ahead.
Let's call it as it is.
Very simply, Liam, are you positive about the future of hurling in Ireland?
I'm positive about the future of hurling. You'll always field a team, but that's not what it's all about. You know, if you want to have quality, you have to have the numbers, and the numbers that are playing hurling. If the numbers keep diminishing and we keep falling out of the top 10, is it good that hurling should fall out of the top 10, or is it good that it should stay in the top 10 as the national sport? Now, if it stays in the top 10 and moves up into the top 10 further, you're growing the numbers, and that's going to grow the quality of the games that people are going to see 25 years from now. So you could argue there's lots of things that happen within the game at the moment that's making the game deteriorate. It's not as good as it used to be in certain areas. I'd love to play the modern game, but at the end of the day, if you are going to have just a field a team, there'll always be fielding teams, but are they as good as they could be?
Yeah.
And are they actually being asked to aspire to a higher level by the quality of the people around them?
We'll take it. The conversation isn't going anywhere, and definitely felt as if it was one worth having this morning. So Liam, thanks a million for jumping on.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Former All-Ireland winning manager Liam Griffin on his defeated motion from last weekend. Right now at 9:15, it's time for the Friday Firepit.
What is it called? Friday Firepit? Friday Fridays.
So we just put a bit more thought into dominating
miserable
comments box this morning. You gotta call it like it is.
It's Friday, like what? The Friday Firepit.
9:15, OTB AM, the Friday Firepit. Kathleen, good morning to you.
Morning, guys. How are we?
All good. What's on the boiler this morning in the hopper?
Well, just kind of continuing on from your conversation at the start of the show. We're going to talk about commentators and what makes a good commentator, and do we really need them anymore? This is kind of following on from a Jonathan Liu article that was very controversial a couple of months back, where he said that there is no necessity for commentators these days because they talk too much compared to the older commentators. They don't leave any space for the silence in the football, and also people aren't just paying attention in the same way they used to. You know, they're on their phones, like a Mr. Colm Boohig last night who was texting me during the United match.
Well, I was actually putting my phone to the other side of the room because I generally take my phone away when I want to watch a match properly, because you can't watch it properly if you're also on the phone. No, I agree with that myself. Yeah.
I agree with myself. Well, I think we.
But Kathleen, I'm interested there. You reported Jonathan Liu's article there. You summarised it, but you agree with it.
No, I don't. I think I understand what he's saying in terms of the fact that definitely commentary is a different art form now than what it used to be. And like I saw a study once about like how many words per minute commentators speak now compared to how they used to, and it is mad, the difference. It's like they have to always be saying something, and because of that, the level of commentary I don't think is as good. But it's a bit like you guys were saying earlier, there is something about just those big moments. And I think actually commentators probably matter more to you when you're a child than they do now. Like when I think of great commentary moments or moments that stick out in my head, or the reason why I love a certain commentator, it's because of a piece of commentary I've heard when I was younger, not so much now. So I think they add that nostalgia element.
I also think your expectations for quality when you're a kid on commentary, like I'm far less cynical or judgmental about the commentators from my childhood than I will be now.
But it's not because you work in the industry.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of, so there are bad commentators, and there are commentators that talk too much, and there are commentators that don't let the match breathe. But that is a different conversation for me than not having any commentator at all, because I actually think that in some ways the increasing use of second screening, WhatsApp, Twitter, whatever you're doing yourself in the middle of a game, nearly increases the need for a commentator, because it means that you're not looking at it. It's nearly more of a radio experience. I certainly know you'd be looking at a game sometimes, depending on what game it is, but you're paying half attention, and then the commentator ramps it up and you're like, okay, what's going on?
They provide a service. I mean, if you're taking a comfort break and you say you're on a different floor of the abode, you want the commentator to alert you if there's a chance. So I mean, that's the first service, yeah. You know what I mean? Well, I'm just giving you an extreme example where you're out of action, physically and mentally you're gone. Also, but I was thinking, like, when Daniel Harris was listing out his favourite commentators, and it was from a bygone era, is it because there was just simply less football on TV, so we had less exposure, so it was more special? Whereas nowadays, like, you could hear the same commentator 3 or 4 times in a week, depending on the amount of football you're
and
ingesting.
Probably for them as well, they might just be getting a bit wrecked with having to talk about football all the time. They say it about like the likes of Martin Tyler and stuff now, that he's just not as interested or as he used to be. And when you listen back to his old commentary, you definitely hear a bit more of the passion there, and you can understand why, if you're talking about football all the time and trying to make it sound exciting all week, 7 days, you would just get a bit
I love a bit of Martin Tyler. I think he adds to.
And also,
the game.
you change. Like if we all sit here again in 10 years' time, Kathleen, which no doubt we'll do, there'll be changes and hopefully whatever else. But I don't know. There's also I don't know if you guys watch the fan channels. So like last night I was watching the United game and I had I have no idea who this guy was, but he was a Manchester United fan and he was broadcasting live on TikTok and he was hell annoyed about a hell of a lot of stuff.
Oh yes.
That stuff is actually, I am not cynical about that stuff. I find it some way titillating, it's entertaining, it's adding a little bit of value and a lot of nonsense.
I think once you accept it for what it is, like you accept it to be, okay, this is fan TV, so you're going to get the fan perspective. But also when they're invested in it and when they're like lying on the floor crying, as many Arsenal fan TVs have been over the years, it is entertaining.
I enjoy it. It's like I get why people would say it's chewing gum for the eyes, Ted, and it's a load of rubbish and you're better off doing something else. But it equally adds a bit, like you were saying, Kathleen, it's like people it's like sitting next to somebody who's like an uber fan of the team you're watching and they're going crazy about it.
You love TikTok.
Yeah.
You love TikTok.
It's a good platform.
I mean, it's hard to impress you, A.
I think that's
and B,
inaccurate. But
I'm impressed that you're impressed. Like, I'd love to know why you love it so much. But you do find
just for that reason that, like, I'm watching United last night. I'm not a United fan. I'm really interested in the game. It's captivating. I'm obviously busy, deeply preparing for this morning show, so I'm sort of paying half attention. But definitely having like the phone sat there and your man, whoever he was, going absolutely bonkers about United was.
See, I would find that hard during a match, though, like to listen to something else on my phone while I'm watching a game in front of me. I think it's slightly different to if there's someone beside you, you can kind of tune in and out of it in a different way to when it's on your phone. I feel like when it's on your phone, you're kind of watching them.
Yeah.
RNA Deck, by the way, was this guy's name. He's like 150,000 followers on TikTok.
You're better than me. I'm not even on TikTok apart from.
You don't even need an account. You just go on it. There's a Liverpool Irish supporter on TikTok who will massively overreact to every result, and it's kind of a thing. It's kind of viral a bit. This guy and. So I'd seen a compilation of it. It was about 6 weeks ago. Is he a joke?
Is he?
I don't know. See, there's 2 Liverpool influence, let's call them, on TikTok, and one guy makes up songs about the players from famous songs and
from
inserts
Cork.
Players' names. No, this is an English guy, and I'm really undecided if it's a parody or not. If it's not, I'm a bit worried. And the Irish guy like goes mad at results. So when Leeds won at Anfield earlier in the season, like, he went viral from that, and there was a compilation. And then this week again, he went viral again because of the Real Madrid demolition job. So that itself is finding its own little niche. I'd move away from that. Like,
well, it's sometimes hard to tell, is that performative or actual
it's definitely
passion?
Performative, because they're on.
But then there are loads of fans who are just as who are
performative,
No, but I mean, there are fans who are like, there are fans everywhere who are going crazy because, Liverpool have been beaten in that instance.
Yes, you're correct. Yeah, he's definitely relating to a lot of fans. Yeah, and they're relating to him. There's a lot of empathy there for sure.
Dara, who works on AM, has said Jonathan Morley is the Liverpool Irish fans name if you need it.
Oh, thank you, Dara. Thank you. Yeah, there's good service there now from the youth. But it is a very personal thing. Like, your love of commentary, or one for me that sticks out, because we did this in the Classic Game Club last year, was the Wimbledon final that Ivanisevic won. And the reason I love that so much is the commentary is absolutely amazing. They really, really captured the emotion of it. And it's actually Pat Cash on co-commentary when Ivanisevic is serving for the match, because he has 4 championship points. So I think it's his first one. And Cash just beautifully summarises it as like, he has tears in his eyes and he's about to serve for Wimbledon. And it's like, even me saying that out loud now, I get goosebumps.
I can see that you're about to.
Do you know what I find weird about this job? Is you meet a lot of the Irish commentators that you've grown up listening to over the years, and it's just so bizarre hearing them speak in like their normal voices and not doing commentary. Like I remember for me, Ral Nugent is one of the voices that always just like brings back so many memories, because he was like commentating on the rugby around the time that I was properly getting into sport for the first time, and it was when I remember my first, proper, oh my God, my team is actually winning. This is a great experience. And I remember covering Ireland, New Zealand in the Aviva for the Autumn Internationals, and he was in the room, and I just heard his voice from the other side, and I was just like, he was just asking for a cup of tea or something, and I was like,
can I have a cup of tea?
It's just really bizarre, even, just meeting these people and seeing them in normal life and be like, you don't live in a little booth and just watch sport all day and talk about it.
It's an incredible skill, it really is. Before I forget, I associate George Hamilton and Jim Begden with Doom from commentating on either big Ireland qualifiers or the Champions League. And it's always the opposition are going to score. Like that partnership always sends a fear of dread down the spine.
Can I throw one out there that we'll probably have to come back to? But the conversation we've just had about the hurling and whether we should be obliged to emphasise the teaching of hurling from a young age.
No, I don't think there's any obligation. But I was on to a friend of mine last night, also from Cork, who's a big hurler, and he would strongly feel the same as Liam Griffin.
I would feel that way.
Well, because I was looking at what he was saying from the perspective of, say, like, there's been an argument for ages, like, should clubs to get funding in, say, the Premier League or wherever it is, or even in Ireland, should they have to have a women's division and women's teams to get that funding? And is there an obligation there? And a lot of what he was saying was interesting to me, because it was just the similar arguments that I've heard for years and years, but in a different context.
Yeah, that's so spot on. Like, it's something that we should look to protect and promote. And so he's identified happening organically. So somebody needs to step in and take action over it. And like, I don't know. Look, I do get the people who are not into GA or don't want to be into it or whatever, do you have to force them to play hurling? And I don't think it's ever really about that, but it's equally about giving the opportunity to play hurling.
I think it'd be interesting if you did bring it forward and say, because it's under 7s and under 9s, and say every club did have to provide that service, and gave it like 5 years or something, and after that 5 years you went back and said, okay, well, how many of those kids have gone on to compete at under 12 or under 14 level, and is it actually making a progression? Because I know, like, at home, we, like, Sligo's hasn't been a massive hurling county, but there's been like a real sort of rejuvenation of the sport over the last couple of years, and a couple of the clubs in my parish got together and set up a hurling team, and like, even you see Eastkey getting to the final this year, like, they're actually doing really well, and there's a real interest in it, and they're starting to set up the smaller or the younger age groups. So like, there is an appetite and kids at that age, if you're playing sport, you just want to play sport.
Yeah, that's the thing. See, I'd stop short of enforcing any obligation to play, but I do think there's no harm in introducing as many sports as possible to kids that age, because they don't know any better, and it will actually help them, as Liam pointed out, which I think is probably the best point for me, is that it will, if anything, it will just improve your skills in other sports. It's transferable. But it's interesting you mentioned Sligo there and hurling. My niece-in-law, I suppose, she's managed to work Gaelic football, and she's progressing very, very nicely. 12 years old, but she's focused entirely on football and not hurling at all, not camogie, like, in any way.
Yeah, and like, you definitely have to have an allowance for choice, but I do think the opportunity is kind of the key with that one. Maybe we'll come back to that again down the track. Kathleen's nodding, saying, yes, get the hell out of here. That is a abridged version of the Firepit on Friday.
What is it called? Friday Firepit? Firepit Fridays.
So we just put a bit more thought into dominating.
Miserable, I guess.
You gotta call it like it is.
Friday, like, come on. The Friday Firepit.
It's nearly 9:30. You're watching OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. And we're nearly finishing our morning. Aisling O'Reilly, though, before any of that, from the Coliseum, I believe. Come on in.
Wow, look at that.
Good morning. Look at this, lad.
That nice green screen.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's the Roman Forum behind me, with the Palatine Hill directly across the road, and straight ahead then is the Coliseum. So what a view for a Friday morning.
Aisling's at home there. Nothing's moving behind her at all.
I can bring you around if you like.
Yeah, do. Yeah, give us a little tour there. Yeah.
Okay, hopefully the connection doesn't go. It's on you, Colm.
Nice.
No, it still looks like a picture. There's nothing moving. Ah, there you go. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely now.
Very cool.
Yeah, very nice.
What's
great for the podcast
many? I had the privilege of being over at many of those weekends. Actually, you'd see the green jerseys start to leak into the city as the day got closer. What's it like at the minute over there?
See, you told you it was a picture.
Your tour of Rome is after killing the slot here, Colm.
I thought it was worth it.
Have you been to the Colum?
I've never been.
Have
So
you been
that
to the
counts. Yeah.
Colum at the Colosseum feels like an item.
Short-lived segment. I've been to Italy once, 2005 skiing. So I need to go back. Nathan's never been. Have you been?
This is like Nathan. We'll just go through the whole company of people who've never been to it. I as I've said there, as you were paying attention to the previous item, I was over to cover. I've been in Italy several times, but a lot to cover games. Yeah.
Wow, simple yes or no. It's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, if you were paying attention, just
have you been to?
You would need to have asked the question.
I have indeed. I went in, what year was that? When I was in TY, I went to Rome. It was quite good. That's the only time I've been. Oh, and also, so I lived in Monaco for a brief month when I was 4. My dad had a secondment to the Princess Grace Library there, and we used to take the train from Monaco into Italy.
Nice.
That's the only times that I've been there.
I mean, in terms of filler slots, that's a nice bit of, nice bit of information.
Well, I was going to ask you before we wrapped. Genuinely in the sporting front, what's your prediction for tomorrow?
Venice, by the way. I've been to Venice.
Oh, I've heard that you only need 2 days there at most, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. My recommendation for you is Praha.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think you'd like it. Would suit you. You good ankles? Your ankles in good health?
Have I good ankles? Yeah, they're
very cobbly.
Yeah.
Just watch the old balance, but it will improve your strength if anything. But no, genuinely, can we talk about
What are you asking me about my ankles for?
If you want to go to Praha, bear in mind that it's all cobblestone.
Okay.
So your ankles will go like.
It is a
genuine point. Like, I don't know what your health was like.
Irish fans need to be patient. Don't expect this game to be won in the first 20 minutes. As Quirky, trust the players in the process, and we'll have enough to win over 80-90 minutes with the bonus point. Quirky, who's definitely he's consuming the Andy Farrell manual of how we approach sport here, I think. Keith Wood hasn't aged a day since he played for Ireland, says extraordinary Gary.
I enjoyed that one earlier when I saw it.
The name or the comment?
The name.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with the comment, but the name in particular.
Massive overreaction to Sancho. 2 good games, 1 bad. Give him a chance, says Selden's plan. And we can start filling now. Aisling, welcome back.
I'm back in action.
Green jerseys. Have we
green
any?
Jerseys. Yes, there's loads of green jerseys around. So obviously outside the Colosseum this morning, people are obviously trying to get in those touristy bits. Obviously coming to a city like Rome, it's an amazing place to come for an away game. Even last night out for dinner, I went to Scholars Bar just here in the city centre of Rome, and the Six Nations trophy was there as well. So we got our pictures taken with that, and there's a great buzz. So you feel the buzz starting to manifest here, and hopefully it is an Irish win at the weekend.
And you've been in and around the camp, obviously the press conference later today after the captain's run ahead of the game, and it really feels like they've embraced. Ronan has been talking to us for a couple of years about the idea of the opportunity that he got from the ethos of the opportunity that he got from Scott Robertson, and that sort of, there's a couple of lads out, but this is not the end of the world. There's an amazing opportunity for all you other players, and it's really a mantra that Andy Farrell is banging this week.
Yeah, big time. 6 changes from the start of 15 against France, and I think that's a good thing, Adrian. This is probably what you want in a World Cup year. You want to be able to see how the likes of Craig Casey gets on. Very excited to actually see him in particular. Obviously, Ross Byrne, his first Six Nations start. He said, in his 16 appearances, he's had 2 starts. This is going to be his 3rd for Ireland, so it's a massive moment for him. We spoke to him during the weekend. He played it down a little bit. He said he's, going to go about things as he always would, but you can't help but feel there's going to be a lot of eyes on him to see how he leads from that number 10 position. So I think it's exciting. I think Andy Farrell wants to see how these lads get on. Obviously, Bundiaki's back in there as well. So, yeah, there's changes, but as he said in the press conference yesterday, he feels this still should be their best performance in the Six Nations so far. So, that says a lot, obviously, with the likes of Johnny Sexton out. But, yeah, I feel that they're looking for a whole performance. That's what they consistently say. We want a full, performance throughout the game, and not parts that are good and come back into the game and maybe let our defensive issues drop and then the team gets back into it. They want to have a full performance. So, yeah, I think tomorrow will be a good eye-opener to see where exactly we're at. Look, we're against Italy, but as they keep saying, it's not the Italy of old. So it'll be very interesting to see how we go.
I enjoyed your interaction with Ross Byrne during the week when you said to him, you've been working on your game, you've come back a much better player, and he was kind of like, well, you might think that, but I've been this player all he was spiky, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, like what I really wanted to say was that, have you read the media at all? Do you read it? You know, do you read papers? Do you listen to the interviews, or do you not bother with it? Because this is what people are saying. And Dan Sheehan just gave a look straight away to say he's always been a good player. And then when Dan Sheehan got a chance to talk, he said, I think the media are very harsh on Ross. So yeah, it came across that way, but really I was trying to say, what's changed? Has anything changed? When he's like, nothing's changed, I've always been this player. But yeah, it was definitely spiky, but that's what it's all about, isn't it? And look, he gets a chance tomorrow, so we'll definitely see then. And he's done so well off the bench in the last 2 games, so no doubt he'll have a big performance.
What are the conditions? Obviously, we would hope for dryness and our ability to fling the ball around a little bit. What are conditions like or expected to be like?
Yeah, it's at the moment it's going to be highs about 17 today, and I think it's maybe 19 tomorrow, but there could be rain. As I'm sitting here, there is trickles of rain. So yeah, hopefully it doesn't continue. But I think mostly it's set to be a dry day with highs of 15 to 17 degrees, which is pretty nice, and perfect conditions for rugby.
Yeah, it's freezing here, so absolutely bite your arm off for that.
It's so cold.
Yeah. What you on a job? Was it one of those jollies you were on last night, like late into the morning job?
Oh no, Adrian, I'm a professional.
You didn't just wander into a venue
that.
with the Six Nations trophy. You're here too. Okay, cool.
Yeah, obviously I got to know a few of the fans. Obviously I met the bar owner, I interviewed the bar owner, so we had a bit of crack, got my picture taken, all of that with the trophy, but no, I was home in bed and all by, I'd say about 12, so not too bad.
Very respectful.
Yeah, have to keep professional.
Keep an eye on OTB social channels over the afternoon. I'm sure there'll be plenty of updates from the captain's run and of course over the weekend as well. Enjoy, Ashley, looks amazing, fair play, thank you.
Brilliant, lads, thanks so much.
Bye.
Cheers. It's quite the setting, like Rome there on one hand, Marbella on the other hand. It's like us two schleps
Do you know what I mean?
in the office all week.
Yeah, I was thinking that Kathleen over there was off to Marbella during the week. Cameron Hill's in Rome, he's going to the match.
Right.
Shane Hannon there was at the United match last night. Look at us.
Schleps.
You were away the other week as well.
You were in Prague.
I was in Prague, do you know that? Yeah, you should go. You'd enjoy it. You'd enjoy it. It's great to see OTB on the road.
Yeah.
Want more of it, if anything?
And we're going to hit the road now. Thanks a million, folks. Colm.
Thanks.
Well done, fair play. You didn't do a Ross Byrne. You did show at times I thought there was going to be a bit of a Ross Byrne, but
no, I enjoyed your presenting. Just seeing you up close work is an honour. IMRO award winning sports broadcaster of the year 2013.
Thanks a million.
Bear in mind,
Thanks,
so I'm with the
we'll do a longer Firepit next week.
Yeah,
promise about that.
We never talk about that actually.
The highlight of your career. OTB AM brought to you by he just continues to ramble and talk. Feel free to kill his mic anytime you want. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Monday show it'll be Ger and Shane bringing you the Gillette Labs performance rankings, reaction to the weekend Six Nations, National League, Premier League and the League Cup final of course as well. And right now we're going to leave you with some Brian McDermott, former Reading manager. He was in conversation, a brilliant chat with Nathan on last night's show. Have a joyous weekend.
All right, I'm delighted to be joined on the line by the former Reading and Leeds United manager Brian McDermott. How are you keeping, Brian?
I'm good, Nathan. How's yourself?
Very well, thanks a lot for joining us. I say former Reading, former Leeds United manager. You've held a lot of other interesting roles in football as well, and an important role in the development of Irish players through the years, the likes of Shane Long, Kevin Doyle. I heard you're so good at spotting players that you saw Shane Long.
That makes me sound like an amazing scout, doesn't it? Don't believe a word of it. Yeah, look, he... Shane was... we knew Shane through Eamon's brother, Patrick Dolan, and he said he was a good player, loads of potential. I watched him play and I knew that... I knew how athletic he was and everything that goes with Shane. And he turned out to be an amazing fella and a great signing for us. He lived with me actually for the first 6 months that he came over. He lived in the house.
Wow. How was that?
It was great. He was he's no different today than he was then. He's just a great guy, hasn't changed. Just a really good fella.
I presume he had the guitar out on a regular basis?
Yes, he did. And I didn't realise he could play. We had a party here once and he played. He blew everybody away. Actually, the funny thing about it was the the first day he went into training, we didn't have too many players at the time. It was 2005-06 season, and he was coming into the training ground. Kevin was there, and he was obviously only 18 years of age. And I stuck a guitar in the back of the boot. And we went into lunch, and there was all the first team players. Steve Coppell was in there, our manager at the time. And I brought the guitar out and I gave it to him and made him play in front of all the lads. He was absolutely devastated, didn't want to do it. But I knew, because he was that good, that his credibility would go through the roof as soon as he started playing. Forget his football. And he played, and I'm not sure he was too happy with the fact that I made him do it. But listen, he was great, absolutely great. And the lads loved him. Because you can't not love him, you just love him as a fella.
His career is one, I think, that's maybe underestimated in this part of the world. We obviously remember the goal against Germany, but just how long he played in the Premier League and how many goals he scored, over 50 Premier League goals. Like, it's easy to say in hindsight, but when you do look back in those first times you saw him, did he have something different to a lot of the players you were looking at in Ireland?
It's hard to make comparisons on any players. He was a young boy who was athletic. He didn't start playing until he was 14. And but what he could do, he could jump and he could run, and he was tough. So he had this kind of criteria. And when he first came across, technically he needed work, and we kind of put him back with the academy players for a short period of time, and we started to develop him. But he developed really, really quickly. Technically he started to get there.
Yeah.
And he started to know exactly what he was doing. He just needed work, but potential. It was the best example I know of potential, and the fact he's fulfilled his potential. He played for his country how many times, and he scored goals for his country, and he's done so many amazing things. Got 50 plus goals in the Premiership.
That's interesting. And you've obviously been scouting up until recently with Arsenal, and at a really high level, and you talk about his technical ability there. So, he comes from a hurling background, so he has that inbuilt toughness in him. As you say, he's lightning quick. He's able to get up and win a header. But you sort of assume, even in the sort of mid-2000s, that you needed the technical ability before you could even go to England. You obviously had a confidence that actually the physical side was taken care of, that you could teach him the technical stuff he needed?
Listen, we bought him for €30,000. So let's be fair. It wasn't a massive.
If it didn't work out,
it wasn't something that we were overly concerned about. We knew he could run. We knew he could jump. He doesn't look the biggest, but he jumps to 6'5". He wins loads of headers. Now, in hindsight, that's what we know. But he could do that then. And it was just trying to get out. It was just trying to find a bit with the ball and trying to do his work with the ball. He did a lot of work in the academy with Eamon Dolan, and he improved. He came off the bench for Steve Coppell's team in the 2005-06 season where we got promotion. And he just kept working and he kept grafting. And it all came for him. And listen, it was the perfect storm.
Everybody who's listening knows a player who went to England and didn't make it and got homesick, and either the standard was too much or they just couldn't hack the life of staying in digs and the relentlessness that's expected of a young professional in an academy. That decision for Shane to go and live with you for 6 months, was that his decision, your decision? Was it something you would do on a regular basis when young Irish players would come over?
It was my decision. I knew. See, a lot of the players come across when they're 15, 16 years of age, and I think it's too early. And the League of Ireland, playing in the League of Ireland, playing games in that standard, for me, is a better it's better to do that. Sometimes it's better than going through the academy system. In my view, it toughens you up, makes you grow up quickly. Just wanted him to know that he was in a good environment where we lived. And who else did I have here? I had a few of the lads here actually. Who stayed, and I was very happy to have them, because I went to Sweden in 1986 and I went to Sweden in 1984, and I remember being on my own and I thought, this is hard work, in 1984 in particular. And you don't want someone coming across and just leaving them there. You want them to be part of a family, and Shane was part of the family really for that sort of 4 or 5 months. Then he found himself a flat, his mum came across, he bought himself a car, and then he went his own way.
We've actually been having this conversation on the show over the last week or so about players staying because of Brexit, that they're going to have to stay those 2 years longer, which for their maturity and their education, it feels like is a real positive thing, but also questioning whether the League of Ireland academy system is ready to educate them football-wise the way they would be if they had gone to an academy. Have you thoughts on that? The fact that a lot of players, and Evan Ferguson, if he was moving now, would have to wait till he was 18, and the impact that might have on Irish players trying to break through?
I think some it will work for, some it won't work for. That's the thing. I like the idea they come across at 18, 19. Kevin came across at 21, and look what happened to him. So he was ready. He was match ready virtually. And he started to play quite regularly, and he was playing for Cork. So I kind of like that way forward. I just think just wait at home, just stay at home for a period of time, play your football, be with your family, be comfortable, and when you're right and you feel ready to come, then come and play. That would be my preferred route if I was a parent, so to speak.
We've gone off on a bit of a tangent. I didn't expect 10 minutes on Shane Long, but he's certainly worth talking about. Your interest in Ireland wasn't just a professional interest. Your dad was from Sligo, your mum was from Clare. There's Irish blood through and through.
Oh, yeah. So look, my story is quite sad, actually. Not so sad now. I've kind of come to some kind of terms with it. When I was 17 in 1979, I had a choice of Ireland and England, and I spoke to my father. Don Howe was the English assistant manager at the time. Don Howe was he was at Arsenal, and we were and he sort of said, you've got to play for England and this, that, and the other. I've got Irish bones, Irish blood. I played for England in a youth tournament, and I kind of think I remember about sort of 6 to 8 months later, after playing in this thing, I think, oh my God, I don't belong here. This is not. So I felt like a complete imposter as far as what the country I was playing for. It's no disrespect to this country. I live here, but my blood is completely Irish, and I felt a complete traitor. And I felt like that for years and years and years and years. And that was one of the issues I had. It was one of the major issues I had, and why I turned to something I shouldn't have done. Just to try to numb that feeling. I always say to people, God, I'd give anything now for one Irish cap. And maybe if I'd have had that one Irish cap, I wouldn't have gone through the stuff that I went through in my life as far as football is concerned and actual life's concerned. But maybe it wasn't the truth. I don't know. But it was, for me, it was, and I think about it every day, even now, to this day.
Right.
Even to this day. And
that was the rule then, was because you had played for the England under-17s.
Yeah.
You could never switch.
No, you couldn't. And it wasn't. And if you'd left me another 8 months, I would have had much more of a mind of my own. I would have done. That's not right for me. But that's what happened at that time, which is sad, really. And I do presentations now, and I talk about this a lot. I talk about identity. And I talk about what that's like for me. And I kind of made my mind up. I thought, you know what? I have to make it up to the whole of Ireland. I have to. I know they're never going to forgive me. Listen, no one cares, Nathan. That it's. I'm sure that no one does. But I thought, I've got to become the Republic of Ireland manager. That's gonna make me feel
numb the pain.
Yeah, but obviously that didn't happen.
And when you think back to that time and Don, how, like, even still we have the conversation of English players are more valuable than Irish players, and was that an impact, say, on a Declan Rice who did play for Ireland and was still able to switch afterwards? What were the conversations you were having away from Arsenal at that time? Did you talk to your parents about it? Were they comfortable or?
Yeah, so my dad obviously was from Sligo, and we always had a bit of a fear of authority, and the Arsenal, we were always nervous of, when you're a professional footballer, you have to be so respectful of the coaches, so respectful of the manager, whatever they say goes. And that's kind of how it was in the 1970s. And that's what it was like for me. And I was always kind of pretty fearful, really. I was fearful of dressing rooms, and I never thought I was good enough in the dressing room, and this kind of thing. So my dad said, what does the coach say? The coach says you play for England, but he's assistant manager for England. He was part of it. So that's what happened at that time. But But later on, like not much later on, I kind of knew. I think, this is the biggest mistake I've ever made in my whole life. And I've told this story many, many times. And I can't do anything about it. And I reflect back. And sometimes I dream I've played for Ireland, I've got a green shirt. And I wake up really sort of quite elated. And I think, oh my God, I didn't. So, I kind of try and sort of talk to younger players now and say, look, it's so important that you get that right. Now, your Declan Rice situation, I don't know what his family situation is. I think it's his grandparent and his mum and dad are English. I don't know.
Yeah, I think his dad definitely has very close links with Ireland, but obviously there is not as strong a connection with an Irish community as the one you had.
No, absolutely. And listen, I know about it. That's where, I was born. And there's a lot of people of my generation, born in England, of Irish parents who feel the same way as I feel. That real strong connection to Ireland and the community.
Well, Kevin Kilban does a lot of work with us, and he speaks about when he was at Preston and was getting called up or been linked with an England under-21 and the pressure that was being put on within the club to go and play for England. And he probably just was fortunate he went the other way and said, no, he has the exact same roots, the same sort of heritage as you have. And obviously we saw what he went on for. That missing on one cap. It's funny, we had Jim Goodwin on, who is probably someone you can empathise at the moment with the strains he's going through as a manager, and he did get one cap. And I had him on the show recently. I was asking him, like, one cap, is it enough for you? Like, are you happy with one cap, or do you wish there was more? And he said, actually, which won't make you feel any better, that the one cap actually did it's something he can look back on and get that sense of satisfaction.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with Kevin is Kilban as well. He was older as well. And, I remember speaking to someone when I was 20 years of age. What happens if England under 21 call you up? And it sounds disrespectful. I don't mean it to sound disrespectful, but I wouldn't have wanted to have played because I just felt it wasn't right for me. How strongly I felt inside.
So if your playing career, and look, you played at a very high level with Arsenal, if your playing career had gone a different way, and England came calling when you were 23, 24, do you think you'd have turned it down?
Do you know what? It's really tough to say that because it never happened. But I know how I feel.
Yeah,
I know how I felt, and I know how I feel today. I was recently spoken to about someone from another national side to do some scouting for a national side, which wasn't Ireland, and I said, I couldn't do that. If someone from the FAI come to me and contacted me about doing some scouting for the FAI, I would do it, but I couldn't do it for another national side, if that makes sense. Because then if I did that, I feel that everything I've said in the last 40 odd years wouldn't be the truth.
Like, I touched on your playing career. Like, you did play at a very high standard. Your debut was with Arsenal. I think it was against Bristol City. I was looking, and you're coming on to a team that had Liam Brady, Frank Stapleton, David O'Leary. For somebody with your Irish heritage, like, that must have just felt like living the dream walking out onto that pitch.
Long story. It didn't feel like living the dream, but it's too long a story to go through here. But I always suffered from this feelings that I wasn't really good enough and didn't belong. I remember my first touch for Arsenal. Liam hit me a ball, must have been 40 yards across the pitch. And it's coming out of the sky and it's 40 yards. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, this is coming towards me. There's 40,000 people in there. So I controlled it on my chest and it went out of play. That was my first touch in pro football. And we won the game. I think we won 3-0. And Liam came up to me afterwards. He said, you got a nice win bonus there. I was 17 years of age. Liam was definitely playing then. I remember that because he gave me the first pass in pro football.
Yeah. The imposter syndrome, which you've spoken about before, you always think from the outside that, like, when you land, so you're lacking a little bit of belief, but then you're on a pitch with, like, Liam Brady. You're on a pitch with Frank Stapleton. You've made it to the first team.
Yeah.
When you look back now, how is it that bit of confidence never clicked in? You play, 50, 60 games for Arsenal?
Played 60 or 70 games, yeah.
Yeah, like, that's at the very elite level of the sport. Was there any moment during those few years where you actually felt comfortable, where you did feel like you belonged?
I was always in and out of the team, really. So my thing was, and I did this even through my management career, even when I was doing successful, I was always fighting myself. I was always fighting what was going on in my head. Trying to stop these demons that were coming in, waking up in the morning, you didn't play for Ireland, you haven't got an Irish cap, what is going, it's not good enough, you should have done this. I was always bashing myself over the head. There was that, and then there was the fact that, am I good enough? You're not good enough. And this constant, washing machine head going on and on and on. And my thought processes were it was really, really difficult, but I didn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
I spoke to someone when I was 12 years of age, and I was at QPR, and I said to one of the coaches, I said, I don't feel good today. I don't feel right. And he went, you've got to be right every day. Every day you've got to be on it. You've got to be absolutely spot on. And I thought to myself, that's the last time I will be speaking to a coach. And I didn't speak to anybody again until I was 53, when I opened up to my wife and said I was struggling over my drink stuff that I would talk about. And I speak today. I open up and talk today. And that's the message I kind of want to come out with and talk about it when I talk in my presentations. Please don't stay quiet.
It is 40 years ago now, so it is a very different generation, and the way we talk about mental health is a very different thing.
Yeah.
By the sounds of that, actually, if there were more forward-thinking coaches, or coaches who had a maybe more holistic view, the sort of view you have as a coach, that would they have been able to help you in the mid-80s?
I don't know, because they weren't there.
You wonder how many players lost potential because of the struggles, and that football had that culture, and still it feels has it to a large degree of, as you say, you got to be on it every day.
Yeah, no, I still believe it's there, that culture. I still think that there's players, coaching staff, managers who stay quiet, who really struggle. I just done a mentoring thing with the League Managers Association. So, I go out and speak to coaches and managers just to sort of talk to them, really, and find out what's going on. And I wish I had that as a manager. I certainly wish I had that as a coach. My nephew now plays for Chelsea. He's 12 years of age, and he's been there since he was 9 and 10. He's just signed a new contract there. So, I'm blessed that I might be able to pass on some stuff to him because of, I see what he's living through, and I thought, wow, that's what I lived through. I know exactly where he's at now at this stage in his career.
Your style of management, when you start moving from being a scout to being a coach at Reading to getting the job on a full-time basis, how much had you thought about what sort of coach, what sort of manager you wanted to be?
Yeah, so I'd been managed by a lot of people who shouted a lot. When I first started managing, and I started managing in the conference, and I was that manager who's shouting a lot. And I thought, what the hell is this? I have become the person that I didn't particularly like. And I realised that quite quickly. So when I was at Reading, I wasn't that person. I was very good at, I was good at saying to the team, listen, we can win this game at Anfield. We can win at Man United. We can win at Liverpool. I had quite a big ego as far as that was concerned, but at the same time, I had the tiniest self-esteem you could imagine. So I'm sitting in the dressing room at Anfield or at Sheffield Wednesday, and it happened once, and I'm thinking to myself, we're going to get beat 6-0 here. Live on TV, this is going to be absolutely humiliating. And actually that happened once when I was manager at Leeds, we got beat 6-0. Once it happened in my career. I've managed about 500 games. And I remember being in that dressing room, and it happened to me all the time. I hated being on my own. I literally hated being on, and I was always on my own in the dressing room away from home. And I tried to cope with that sort of feeling of being on my own before you walk out onto the pitch. And that was a real drama for me between 2:15 and 2:45.
From the outside, that just doesn't it doesn't make sense to people who would have looked at you, because again, all we see is the public side. It feels like there's almost three parts to your life. There's the public facing side, which is you, the guy who goes on Match of the Day after the game, and you have to put a brave face on it, and you can't show any vulnerability whatsoever. There's a professional side where there's insane pressures coming from above, from chairmen who at times can be erratic depending at the club you're at, but you have to keep things together for your players and for all the staff at the club. And then the private side that we just don't see, that it's carnage behind the scenes. It feels like at certain times that like there's such a struggle going on that you cannot let out like that. That's an incredible balancing act that you have to go through for, it felt like, for your entire managerial career.
And my playing career, same. It's not carnage; it's carnage in my head.
Right.
That's the thing. So in my head, it's carnage. It's not carnage around me. So what I was good at was kind of looking after my staff, looking after my players. But I forgot one person, and that was me. And I realised today that, you know, on every day I wake up, I've got to do whatever I've got to do to make sure that I get in the best possible headspace. And I've got a bit of peace now for the first time in my life. For the last 8 years or so, I've literally got a bit of peace, which is just, I live quite a simple life now. And I thought that, you know, if I had one cap for Ireland, that would have been the difference. If I became a Premier League manager, which I did, that would change it. If I got a bigger car, that would be the difference. If I got a bigger house, if I got an extension to the bigger house, that would make the difference. All of this stuff, you know, the Irish one will never happen, but, you know, all of this stuff I thought would make the difference to me. None of it did. And all of it is external. All of it's external stuff. And actually, I realise it's an inside job. I've got to look after what's going on inside me.
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar. Off the ball,